everyone. Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Deep Dive.
Woo! Welcome
Metallica.
back. Say it again.
Metallica.
Here we go.
A discography of epic proportions, if you will.
Something to tackle. It was rough.
It was rough, he says.
It's going to start that out.
All right, so a real quick rundown of Metallica. Formed in 1981, Metallica is one of the founding bands of the Big Four, thrash metal scene of the time. Those bands are Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax. Kind of lukewarm on half those bands.
Don't know many.
Mostly the lineup has been the same since the early days. A couple change-ups, notably just in the bass player section, as well as firing Dave Mustaine early on, right after the first album for his rock and roll antics, just being a crazy drunk, which apparently you cannot do in Metallica unless you're James Hetfield.
Unless you're him.
No, I'm just kidding. I know people always bring that up, but the difference is, I guess, is he was fucking up shows and costing them money and shit from being a reckless asshole. Much the same reasons that Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley kicked out Ace Frehley and Peter Criss in the band Kiss, which I know Rex is super excited to take on Kiss.
Cannot wait. Cannot wait to get some of that tongue.
Other than that, Dave Mustaine went on to form Megadeth. Ooh. Which everyone as knows is the biggest rival of Metallica.
That's crazy how that worked out.
Yeah, but he always complains about that shit, but his band is like huge. They're no Metallica, but they're fucking up there.
They're big.
Like, everyone knows who the fuck Megadeth is. So, unfortunately, bass player change-ups led from the late, great Cliff Burton to his very, very capable replacement, Jason Newsted, and then much, much later, Robert Trujillo, however the fuck you say his name.
I don't know how to pronounce anything.
I don't know. But I know Metallica is made up of lead singer, rhythm guitarist James Hetfield, drummer Lars Ulrich, lead guitarist Kirk Hammett, and current bass player Robert Trujillo. If I'm saying that wrong, Robert, sorry.
Sorry, dude, and everybody else we've butchered.
Metallica as a band has sold 125 million albums.
That is crazy to think about.
It is. It's a shitload of albums.
It's a third of America. 1/3 of Americans have the album.
And that's why when you hear people say, like, Metallica sucks, be like, you had to have at least bought one of their fucking albums.
You know one of their songs, too.
Exactly. Like, who doesn't know at least one Metallica song? If they say they don't, they're fucking lying. First, finding commercial success with their third album, Master of Puppets, which led them into the forefront and ended up being the poster boys of the Big Four. With that said, let's go ahead and dive into all that is Metallica.
Love it. Can't wait.
Well, as you said, it was a chore for you, so let's get into that just a little bit. What do you mean by that?
So early Metallica, especially, I have a hard time with James's voice. His flares he does when he sings, his little rah, you know, like I can only handle it. Yeah. I'm a yeah. And like I get it. That's his signature. That's his. He does it throughout his entire career. It gets a little less and more kind of singy later on. Right. Don't know what to really call that.
It's his yarl.
Yeah, yarl.
His
I like
affectation.
That.
Yeah, his
yarl.
Like
his yarl. It's his yarl. No, we'll go with that. So, I just didn't really ever care for it, and that's why I never took to Metallica like everybody else. His voice is just kind of jarring to me, and I'm not a huge fan of it. So getting through that first, that was the big hurdle.
Okay.
And
but other than that,
better.
Is it just James's voice, or are there other things?
I think some of it is I just don't relate as much to the music. If anything, or to what they're singing about, I guess. Like, some of their songs are sweet. Like, I get what some of them are about, but a lot of them I just don't.
Connect
Product of their
with.
time.
Yeah.
I'm just product of the time, you know, they know what they're talking about. I probably don't. And so there's just a little bit of a disconnect for me.
I gotcha.
But outside that, no, like guitaring, drumming, everything musically, they're amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They're
top
amazing.
notch, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. James Hetfield is arguably the greatest rhythm guitarist of all time. You know, he plays a lot of semi-intricate riffs while singing, and you know, he does that shit live. So it's not like it's all studio shit. He's fucking all up.
That's awesome.
It. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
For me, on the other side of that token, Metallica is one of my favorite bands of all time. One of the most influential bands to me playing instruments in general, both guitar and drums. I know Lars Ulrich gets fucking absolutely shit all over these days.
Does he?
Yeah, it's part of the modern hive mind. It's the same type of person that tries to hate all over Eminem these days. It's shifted. You know, he used to be very well respected, and you'd see a lot of drummers cite Lars as a huge influence to them. And he should be, because while he's not the greatest drummer in the world, I'll be the first to admit that, he is one of the best and most influential metal drummers of all time. I mean, and that doesn't always come down to his technical proficiency. It's a lot of factors. He's a songwriter. He's very good at what he does. He's able to help market the band in a way that no one else has been able to.
So wait, he writes some of the lyrics for Metallica too, on top of composing and all that?
Well, like the main three dudes will sit in a room, and James will riff, and Lars will tell him, I like that, but take this off. I like that, or trim it, or play it faster, or play it slower, or he'll mimic a line. Like, I want it to be like, ding, 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 ding. You know, the Enter the Sandman riff was largely created by Kirk Hammett, but Lars came in and added a couple tweaks, and it's led to the riff we know now. So he's a real pivotal part, and like I said, it's the John Lennon, Paul McCartney thing for the Beatles of metal. Those two guys, they're like peas in a pod when it comes to writing music together.
When it's like,
yeah, and that's why it led to so much later turmoil when they got like a counselor involved for some kind of monster and filmed that movie. And we'll cover that later. We're not going to get fully into that movie, but Rex hasn't seen it yet, so we're not going to have a lot to say, but I will mention it when we get to that point. All that said, he's fairly lukewarm on Metallica. I'm a pretty big fan, so you guys are in for a treat.
This is going to be a great episode. I just can't imagine it.
Absolutely. And with that, we're about to dive in. We got 1983. We've got
Kill 'Em All.
Oh, baby.
And that's how the band started. So, a couple little facts about that. Album was originally intended to be titled Metal Up Your Ass, which is hilarious.
That's hilarious. I did find that out about this album, and weren't they going to name themselves something different?
That I don't remember. I've remembered Metal Up Your Ass my whole life because there are bootlegs out there called Metal Up Your Ass. Like, I think you can find it on cassette maybe, or maybe early CD. But the label made them change it. They were like, it's not going to find the same commercial success if we do that.
Definitely not, but it would have been a sweet name.
Oh, for sure. And sometimes you just got to do it, though. Like the Butthole Surfers, the name of their band kept them out of playing lots of live shows and shit, but it also gained them a lot of notoriety because people are like, the Butthole Surfers? What the fuck would you call your name that? Yeah. I love that band. Another one of my favorites, but we'll get to that at some other time.
A bunch of buttholes.
So when it dropped, Kill 'Em All was only expected to sell about 15,000 units and went on to sell 60,000 over time, which is pretty crazy for the time period. Those are kind of the numbers that you see these days, though, because streaming has killed physical media.
Yeah, but I mean, 60,000 when you're only expected to sell like 15.
Yeah, and
people out of the water.
Might I add, these dudes are like 16 years old when they're recording this album. They're young as fuck.
Jeez.
So that also
mom's permission.
And that's another reason with James's voice that it's so weak sounding and weird on the first album because it's like he knows who he wants to be vocally, but he just doesn't quite get to sound the way we know him until later. But
it's got some good songs on it. It was this one and Ride the Lightning were probably the two hardest as far as early Metallica to get through,
right,
because it was rough voice wise, but as far as guitar and everything, it was amazing. Those songs are great.
And a lot of that from the fan base will say, well, that's because Dave Mustaine helped write a lot of those guitar riffs.
The Megadeth guy, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where so you got waves of fans. There are the complete crazy Metallica fans that don't give a shit about Dave Mustaine, and they're like, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, he wrote a couple songs, whatever. Then there are some of the real elitist Megadeth fans that are like, Dave, you know, helped write all of their badass songs, and that's just fucking ridiculous because they've been a band for 40 fucking years now and written some of the biggest memorable songs ever without Dave. But it's just that elitist group. So one fact I'm gonna have to throw at you every time we cover an album is their total album sales, though. I thought it was notable to mention where the album sat upon release, but here's a more notable fact for you.
Let's hear it.
Total album sales, 3 times platinum, 4,500,000. For your debut album, that's fucking nutty.
That is nutty.
I mean, we'll see later how that changes down the line, but just thinking about the sheer amount of numbers of that is fucking wild, you know.
That is insane. But I mean, 60,000 right off the bat for your first album back then. You know, I don't know how thrash was doing in the scene, but
thrash was a big deal. It was part of like the post-punk revival. People were looking for something new. And, you know, these guys, all of those bands were influenced by early punk, which is where the fast-paced shit comes from.
Okay.
And then, you know, thrash goes on to inspire like hardcore later.
Yeah.
Punk
absolutely.
and hardcore. It's like mixing those two things. So it's kind of cool that Metallica was there right at the beginning. And all 4 of those bands started at relatively the same time. I mean, Megadeth was literally started right after he left. There was almost no lull. It was like the next year, here's Megadeth. And then Slayer is out the gate in like 83 or 84. And then fucking Anthrax is like 82, late 83, something like that. So it's like, they're all hitting the fucking scene, and thrash just fucking blew up at that point. You got all these bands inspired by punk, but also all of the like proto metal bands before them, like Black Sabbath and Deep Purple and, you know, heavy music's origins, which is awesome. I mean, for me, I'm a big fan of just rock history, so that stuff just makes me giddy as fuck, and I know I'm not the only one like that. I'm not. It's awesome.
No, this information is great.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
This album was interesting. Definitely a different Metallica than I'm used to. I didn't really listen to this early stuff, Ride the Lightning or Kill 'Em All. I started about Master of Puppets on, stopped at Black Album, heard Death Magnetic, and that was really about it. I never listened to Load, Reload, or Saint Anger. Not for any reason. I just never did.
Most people don't willingly want to listen to Sin Anger.
No?
I mean, it's just one of those albums.
It just, was not. We'll get to that in a bit. But anyways, no, Kill 'Em All was all right. Again, not my favorite, but it had its moments.
It's got some bangers on it, like Hit the Lights,
Seek and Destroy.
Seek and Destroy, Four Horsemen, Whiplash.
I was about to say Whiplash.
Yeah. Those are like Kill 'Em All essentials. If you're going to skim over a Metallica album because, you know, maybe you agree with Rex and the whole James Hetfield's voice on this album, but you want some highlights, just grab those 4 tracks. I think those will pretty much sum it up. I mean, obviously there are some other deep cuts on there that you might like or enjoy, but those are the 4 that, you know, if you're making a Metallica playlist, pop those 4 bitches in. Yeah.
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 I'll be honest, I don't know if I'll ever listen to this album again.
I mean, it's one of my least favorite albums by them, but that's
Interesting.
only a testament to how much better they've gotten. And again, there are already some Metallica fans out there probably listening to this episode, and they're like, this guy's a bitch, you know? Like, but it's real divided.
Everything's there except the lyrics and the singing for me.
Yeah.
Everything else is there. And, you know, those are quite essential to how you perceive a band,
Yeah.
especially like them, you know.
How do you feel about the guitar work, though?
It's amazing. Like I said, it's all there.
It's just his voice.
It's just his voice and just what they're talking about. It's just not things I can, you know, like I said, there's no connection for me to really want to listen to these songs again.
Right.
Like listening to the album once it was done, I wasn't like, man, I need to listen to that again. Like I want to listen to that again. Like
Did you have
said,
that feeling for any of these albums? Because that's my question.
Yeah, Death Magnetic.
What?
Yeah, I know. Death Magnetic. I've obviously listened to Master of Puppets and Justice for All, Black Album quite a few times. Quite a few times actually. So for those albums, yeah, I've listened to them again and I will. But
All right.
you know, I didn't listen to a lot of Metallica, like I said, and when I did, it was what I chose. And everybody, like you said, loved Master of Puppets and Justice for All, Black Album. So of course I jumped on those, and they were okay.
Yeah. I give the album like a light 6. I might even
Interesting.
be half like 5.5 maybe. Just
That's
because
really interesting.
it's the same thing you're saying. As a big Metallica fan, I don't go back and listen to it often. I've listened to it in its entirety 6 times in my whole life, maybe.
Okay.
As a hardcore Metallica fan. Those 4 tracks we mentioned, like I told you, I listen to Metallica all the time.
Yeah.
And those 4 tracks are on my Metallica artist playlist, but Kill 'Em All as an album, yeah, 5.5, 6.
Especially for Metallica now, like I feel like it's an album you wouldn't want to give somebody because it would misrepresent what they are now.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on what era of Metallica they're into, though. Like, if they've never heard it and you know they're into fast metal, then you might be like, just check out Kill 'Em All, Lightning, Justice, and Puppets. And, you know, but you're not going to recommend fucking Black Album, Load, Reload, Saint Anger, if that's what they're looking for.
True, but I don't know. I would probably just go straight to Puppets and then Justice for All and skip Ride the Lightning and but yeah, it would depend on the person, but I would probably show them that.
Yeah. Well, what would you rate the album though? Because if you're never going to listen to it again, I have to assume it's pretty low.
I don't want to say it's that low. I'd say it's probably about a 5. Yeah, 5 for me. If I could get over his voice and, like I said, build more of a connection to it, it would all be there for me.
Yeah.
And it would probably start rating these quite a bit higher than I do now. But I just, again, product of the time, especially in their Loads, Reload, and Saint Anger, I don't know what the fuck they're really talking about. Like what he's singing about. Some of the shit just sounds nonsensical to me, I'm being really honest.
I mean, some of it probably is. You have to, I mean, it really depends on, like, later albums, there is very specific content about what he's talking about from, like, Ride the Lightning forward. But at 16, he doesn't have, I mean, he's used to partying, probably fucking a bunch of girls, getting his first guitar.
Yeah.
You know, he's not really experienced a lot of shit. But then,
I mean, it's impressive for their age. 16-year-olds made this album. That's fucking, that's impressive.
I mean,
Just all
don't
in
quote me on
itself.
that. I'm pretty sure like 16 or 17.
Well, they're probably young.
They're young as fuck. Like they might even be younger than 16 because I remember being shocked at the ages. Like if you look at James Hetfield's age and just subtract his current age from the release date of Kill 'Em All, you'll get your answer. But it's between 15 and 17 because they were young. Lars had put out an article in one of the local like Big Nickels or Want ads and was looking for a guitar player, and
it's called
James
The
answered that
Recycler.
shit. Yeah,
Yeah, it's called The Recycler,
Yeah.
and that's how I met James.
which
He
is
was playing
awesome.
with some other band.
Yeah,
I forgot. Yeah.
same thing happened with the Beatles and Ringo Starr. When they fired Pete Best, they put out an ad and were on the hunt, and then they just found Ringo, and the rest is fucking history.
It actually turns out he was 20 during the release of Kill 'Em All.
Okay, 20. Okay, so that makes sense. So he was 18 when they formed
In
the
81.
band.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, so that makes more sense.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
They were still
17, 18 to
kids. They were still
formation.
kids.
And then, yeah, still kids at 20. So, you haven't experienced a lot at 20. You probably don't got a
No.
lot to say. So,
I
that's the Kill 'Em All era.
I don't think that's the reason. For me not connecting lyrically,
Mhm.
I think it's
Whoa.
me. It's more me than it is them. I'll be honest, because a lot of times I find my like in somebody randomly listening to a song,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden I'll hear something
Mhm.
like some kind of lyric, some word, rhyme, whatever it is they use, and I really like it, and that'll make me listen to the song, and it'll make me go back and listen to the album,
Mhm.
and then check out more of their stuff if I don't know it. But this never caught on with me with this album.
Makes sense. I don't personally give. This might be weird to the listeners and maybe even you. I personally don't give that much of a shit about rock and roll lyrics. Like,
Interesting.
when I'm listening to a rock band, I'm listening to the music and the vocal tones and the patterns and like how it grooves to me and shit. They could be saying anything. That's why I'm a big Red Hot Chili Peppers fan. Anthony Kiedis is largely saying just a bunch of nonsense, but he uses what sounds good in the scheme of the song. So like it's what complements it to me. Now that's not to say there are not rock and roll or metal songs that I don't super relate to, which actually there are a bunch for Metallica, ironically, but
Yeah,
we'll get
yeah.
to that later. Anyway, so that's basically Kill 'Em All. Exit Dave Mustaine. Pretty much the last time we see him associated with Metallica, with the exception of a few songs on Ride the Lightning that he had kind of written, and then they were just recorded later, and they do credit him for those. So moving on to that, we have
Ride the Lightning. 1984.
and with that album, they went 6 times platinum.
Jeez.
Double the Kill 'Em All numbers already. 6,950,000 albums. And if you think that's mind blowing, it's going to get a whole lot fucking crazier as we go along. Couple cool facts about Ride the Lightning is the album title is taken from Stephen King's The Stand. There's a character in that book that always refers to the electric chair as riding the lightning, which is cool.
That is cool.
First album I ever heard by the band, actually, Ride the Lightning.
This was your first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, like I said, I've mentioned many times, my dad, he just bought 6,000 records yesterday. 6,000.
Nice.
6,000.
Only a couple.
Yeah. It's like 100 fucking boxes in his garage right now. It's ridiculous. But anyway, he's always really been big into music, so Ride the Lightning's one of those albums I found when he used to keep his vinyl in my closet as a kid, because we lived in like a 2-bedroom apartment. So he would store his collection in there. Ride the Lightning, I pulled that bitch out, largely based on the cover, just the chair.
It's a cool cover.
It's a sick ass cover, yeah. Definitely some of my favorite songs by Metallica are actually on this album. For Whom the Bell Tolls. That song is one of the reasons I play guitar. Like I mentioned, them being an influence on me. I learned that song very early on. Creeping Death, Fade to Black, Call of Cthulhu. Just fucking absolute badass songs on that album.
I think my favorite's the first song.
Fight Fire with Fire.
Fight Fire with Fire.
Fight Fire with Fire.
It comes in with that 12-string acoustic. It's amazing, and it keeps going, and then the song picks up, and yeah, It's a great.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed it. Coming off Kill 'Em All, I was pretty stoked.
Really?
The first song, I was like, all right,
Hell yeah.
I like this more. I like this a little bit more. Sounds great. I loved it. I mean, like I said, nothing was really wrong musically with Kill 'Em All, but oh man, just the start to this album was great for me. I'm a fucking sucker for acoustic shit. I don't.
So do you like
Whatever.
Fade to Black then?
Yeah.
Because okay.
Oh yeah. No, I was just saying I really like Fight Fire with Fire. It's a great intro to this album, and it definitely kind of put this album, just a step above Kill 'Em All right off the bat for me. But
Lyrically, there's a lot of heavy subject matter on Ride the Lightning. I don't know if you caught any of it, but early Hetfield lyrics are about like war and PTSD and serial killers and just really dark shit.
I knew about the war stuff and PTSD, but I didn't know about can't even talk. I didn't know about serial killers or anything like that.
Nothing like largely specific, but just like psychological headspace type shit. Like that's like the approach to a lot of the songs. I mean, and that's kind of a trope in metal anyway. But
yeah.
But this was early. This is like these guys influencing that shit later. And
I do want to stop and say that they originally, it says here, pressed only 75,000 copies, but within 3 years it sold 500,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive for back then.
And the crazy thing too about those numbers is this is like, when did this album come out? 84. So this album is about 6 or 7 years before Nielsen SoundScan came in and started tracking album sales. So those are just guesstimations. It could have been way more than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
In 91, that's kind of when that shit starts, right around the Black Album time. And you'll see the rise in numbers when we mention that. But yeah, Ride the Lightning for me is a fucking great album. This is complete different contrast to Kill 'Em All. I listened to this bitch all the way through all the fucking time. I love it. I mean, my dad got it for me for Christmas a couple of years ago, and he's like, yeah, I figured you'd want that. I'm like, dude, I have this on vinyl. I have this on cassette. I have this on CD.
I have it on everything.
And he knows I'm a big Metallica fan too, but I think he was I started collecting vinyl I already had with CD, like I have it on CD, and then I was like, fuck it, I'll get it on vinyl too. So he was getting me that thinking I didn't have it yet, but that's how much I love Metallica, and I'd already bought all that shit pretty early on. But
it's a great album.
No, it is. Yeah.
I liked it for about as much as I think I can like a Metallica album. Especially this early on. Like I said, even though I like this more than Kill 'Em All, it was still kind of a rough one for me.
Yeah.
You can definitely hear the more confidence in Hetfield's singing.
Oh, yeah.
You can tell that he's definitely kind of becoming more of his role. But
it's only a year later, too.
Yeah, it's impressive, especially number-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Only a year later, and they just shipped out that many. But
and how polished the recording is, which is, I wanted to bring that up, actually. What was his name? Something Rasmussen.
Yeah,
Fleming Rasmussen. Yeah, he produced Lightning, Puppets, and Justice.
So he had a 3-album run with them.
Exactly.
Well, it does sound great compared, and obviously I'm listening to the remastered versions on Spotify, so they probably sound a little more crisp and sharp, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounded good, and there are good Metallica songs on there. I am surprised I didn't listen to this album sooner, but I have heard the songs like Fade to Black in them, but I just never got around to listening to this album.
Mm-hmm.
But it does have some good ones. I also like Creeping Death.
Dude, that's a top 10 Metallica song for me.
It was a sweet song that came across. I definitely had to take a look at that one to make sure I remembered. But I give this one probably a 6.5 for me.
Yeah, interesting. I'd probably give it about an 8. Well, what's cool about this, and maybe at some point, or maybe I'll send you the video afterwards, but they had this live DVD called Cunning Stunts, and it was pretty awesome. And it was just, them doing all their biggest songs, and and Jason Newsted was there, and he's not in the band yet at this point on the album, but he was for that live show, and they're doing Creeping Death live, and you can feel that shit in the audience with how pumped everyone is for that song when they get to the part of the song where it's like, die by my hand, killing firstborn man, and he's killing the part, and James and Jason are just playing really well off each other, and like, you'll have to see it. Like, it's too bad we didn't get a chance to dive completely in, like, with the live stuff and some kind of monster, but we gotta cut it at some point, or we'll be fucking talking forever.
Ever. But so you give it an 8.
Yeah.
Would you say this is your favorite Metallica album?
Not even close.
Not even close.
No,
okay, so
close.
It's rated so high based on more nostalgia and being your first Metallica album.
No, I just think it's a quality album.
Okay.
Nostalgia doesn't play that big of a factor with me with stuff, honestly. Like, I'm judging it for the music that it is.
Okay.
They're a metal band. I think it's a really solid fucking effort, especially for their sophomore album, which we had just talked about on our actual first duo version of Side Dive with the album
Side
classics.
Dive.
Yeah. So that's cool. So check that shit out if you haven't.
Definitely.
Check out the Beetlejuice episode too, god damn it.
It was a great episode.
Yeah, it was a good episode. Both of those movies rule. I don't know why that one's not getting any love, but...
What's your beef with Mr. Juice?
Yeah, it's like one of those moments.
I can't even believe it.
Dude?
Mr. Juice deserves a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely give Juice his love. Just not O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
That guy sucks.
I like that. But so Ride the Lightning, then where does it fall on your list? Like, if you were to say, we'll not spoil the rest, but let's say your top 5, does it fall on top 5 Metallica albums?
No.
Okay.
No.
So we'll just leave it at that.
But that's just, I mean, again, that's just how good they are. It's like when we did the Fincher episode.
Yeah.
Some of his shit has gotten marginally better, but I'd still give some of the older shit perfect 8s or 9s and shit,
Agreed.
So with that said, we're moving on to the final album, unfortunately, with bassist and one of the founding members, Cliff Burton.
And he passed away, right?
Yeah, he died in a bus accident.
Oh, that's right. I read about that. It's
Yeah.
like some kind of icy road or something like that.
Yeah, and they all could have died, but apparently only Cliff died, which is fucked up.
That's sad. It's sad
it
to
is.
see your bandmate just die, like somebody you're making music with, you're on the road. They hit it big too, they're fresh.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 3 albums in, but smashing it, and then all of a sudden, that's sad.
Done
That's
for,
so
yeah.
sad.
And he was a fucking great bass player. Like, it's not even a matter of just his abilities, but his creativeness and almost iconicness early on for the first 3 albums here. And it really is a shame. But with that said, 1986, Master of Puppets.
Love it.
Hell yeah.
It's great.
So 6 times platinum. Their
another
breakout
6.
album. Yeah.
So
This is the one that gave them huge commercial success. 7,980,000 records sold. Album is just banger after banger for me, dude.
it does. There's probably only about one, Leper Messiah, I'm not the biggest fan of.
Really?
I probably skipped that one, but
Understandable, I
almost
guess.
all of the rest, I listen to all of them.
So you mentioned Fight Fire with Fire being a killer opener for you on Ride the Lightning. How do you feel about Battery? Because Battery is a fucking...
Battery's a great song. I like that song just in general. When I think of Metallica, I think of like Battery, Battery. It's fucking good. I liked it. Master of Puppets was probably the first full Metallica album I listened to. So it still has the problem with Hatefield's voice. A lot better, a lot more like it sounds more like who I imagine Metallica is when it comes to his singing.
Come on,
like
man.
This album on.
Papa Het. That's what
I
he
used
goes
to
by
thought
now.
his name was Hatesfield. And
Hetfield.
I used to always think it was Hates, and I was like, I hates his voice.
It's wild. But again, it's not the first time I've heard that. I know there are people that are very indifferent to James Hetfield's voice. I personally love it. I think he's like that quintessential metal voice for the non-screaming shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's either so there are like stages of it. There's him, which is the hard rock heavy metal shit, and then there's the high pitch, like Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden, where they're doing the more like, which is tied too. But it's cool how there are just different levels for it. But I think he's like quintessential heavy metal voice.
I can see that. Like, his voice is definitely unique. It's a unique.
And his lyrics on this album, I mean, I love them personally. I gotta defend the good majority of these ones because Welcome Home, Sanitarium.
That's a great one.
That song is so goddamn good that it just blows my mind. That was my favorite Metallica song for probably a decade.
Really?
Like, yeah, I love it, dude.
What's your new one?
Oh, man. That's tough. You know, probably unpopular, but Now That We're Dead on Hardwired to Self-Destruct.
Okay.
I think that song is fucking badass. I like songs like that are like very grim in nature, but told in kind of a more basic way. Where that song is really fucking heavy and the lyrics are right to the point. Obviously, you know, it's just like some psycho dude. He's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife is dead, or his woman is dead, or whatever. I mean, I don't remember the exact specifics of it, but I like that. That's probably my current favorite. Either that or The Memory Remains on Reload. I love that song too.
Okay.
It's a good one. But yeah, I mean, overall though, there isn't a song on this album I dislike. A huge shout out to Orion, because that song was written by Cliff Burton, and you know, he pretty much leads it with his bass parts.
Mm-hmm.
And dude, it's just a killer song. I miss Cliff Burton. He fit that band so well. If he hadn't died, I don't know they would have gone the commercial route that they later went, because he was very
anti
heavy metal. Yeah, fuck this and fuck that. And I think when they lost him, it changed them in a pretty severe way. And while they did follow this album up with Justice, and Justice is another certified classic in this regard.
Another great one, yeah.
But I don't know. This album influenced a whole generation of metal.
It does. I mean, Metallica itself, you can hear it, you know, like we always say, this is your favorite brand's favorite band.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Metallica inspired metal we know today.
Exactly.
And so without them, I don't know where we would be. But do you think metal would be where it's at if what you think would happen if Cliff didn't die?
I think they'd just still be big, but they would be remembered for different things in that field.
Do you think they just have as big an influence on music as they would now?
I do.
You do?
Because they have lightning in a bottle. Mm-hmm. And I think it shows even on recent albums. Like, they still got it even in their old age. And, you know, while the studio might help maintain a lot of that shit for them, and because they're older, they still have it where it counts, which is the songwriting. And, you know, the songwriting to me in music is so fucking important. It'll make or break a band. You know, that's why when certain people are like, I love the Ramones, and I'm like, okay, save for the real poppier shit, their deep cuts are really nothing wild. Like, they're not memorable.
Mm-hmm.
There's just certain artists that don't have it to the point where every album is going to be remembered. And I think for Metallica, the majority of their albums are remembered, even if it's good or bad. And the bad stuff is always production or the change in style. But I think the songwriting is always there, and it's always solid. And I think Master of Puppets takes what Ride the Lightning laid down and just explodes all over that shit. It's just like, all right, here, let's raise the bar again.
I think you're right. If I would say Ride the Lightning is more the foundation they built, and Master of Puppets is the house they built on the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Because this album definitely leads them into what they are today.
Right.
I mean, not in just that, yeah, without this album, they wouldn't have blown as big or anything like that. But when you listen to And Justice for All, once again, they do the same thing. It's like they tore down Master of Puppets and then built on top of that by using pieces of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened when they did this album. Maybe it's production, like you said, maybe just getting better, but they, like I said, this is the Metallica when I think of them, their sound. No matter if their new stuff, you know, Kill 'Em All, whatever. When I think of Metallica, I think of like this album and Injustice for All. That's like what I think of Metallica.
I think most people do.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Yeah. That's where people lock in with, you know, they're not the band they started as. But when people hone back to who they are, it's this era. It's Kill 'Em All to Justice. This is the foundation, the execution, the influence, the biggest reason they're popular. And that's why I think if Cliff was still around, they'd still be that big. But it would be I wonder if there is a timeline out there where Cliff Burton didn't die and the fifth Metallica album is not the Black Album and it's called something completely different and it's like the culmination of these 4 albums. What would it be, you know? Like, it would be wild.
So you don't think Black Album is the culmination? Like, when you think of this guy or these guys, you start at Master of Puppets and Justice for All, and then you hit Black Album. Do you not think that Black Album took everything that made these and did it better again?
No. I think as musicians and songwriters, yes. But the style of music, no. I don't think it does that. I think it matures. I think it realizes we can't make this album 6 more times, which is what that's my biggest question to people when they're like, why didn't they remain thrash? And it's like, you want to hear the same album 30 times. You know, they were pretty good doing it 3 times in a row. Let's not count Kill 'Em All, because again, when I think of Metallica in this time period, it's Lightning, Puppets, Justice.
Okay.
And with those 3 albums in a row, it's that 3 album run that almost every big artist has. Eminem, that 3 album run, it's a lightning in the bottle that you can't capture a 4th time as hard as you fucking try. You're going to be different because that is a lot of time in between who you were and who you are. And I think they mature greatly. And I think that pisses a lot of people off. And they want this angsty young Metallica without realizing that in 1991, they aren't that angsty young Metallica. So how do we remain relevant? How do we still be a force to be reckoned with in the metal world, but not really be our core thrash sound?
So with saying that, do you think that with Cliff alive, they would have flopped the 4th album trying to achieve this thing again? Because he would have been against, like you say, well, what I feel you imply is that he would have been against a lot of the change they did for the Black Album. So with everything you just said, do you still really think that with Cliff alive, they could have kept this thrash sound up through the 4th album and even to this day? While still growing as a band.
It's hard to say because he's not even on Justice. So I don't know what elements on Justice he would have contributed to or
That's
didn't
fair.
like, you know, but I think the album would be different. I don't think it's just Cliff is that quintessential metal dude from what you read about with them, you know. They were all kind of like that at the time, but Cliff kind of stood out just if you read certain stories as that more punker version of all of those guys.
Yeah.
And I don't think he would necessarily be against being a fucking multimillionaire because of the Black Album success, but I just know that album would be very different because it would have to be. one of their core members is gone. So he's not on Justice. The band feels stale with that sound without hearing any of what Burton's influence would be to them or feedback. And the three core members kind of shift with a new bassist, a new producer, a new era. That album came out in 91, hot on the heels of now dying hair bands and the rise of grunge rock. They basically reinvent metal again. You know, they push it into the forefront with their thrash sound, and then here we are in 91, boom. But we'll get to that because we're not quite on the Black Album yet. I just thought it would be worth bringing up because it's what everyone talks about, that hive mind mentality, you know. I'm all about the old days, and as soon as the Black Album hits, fuck them. And I just don't think that's fair.
See, yeah, we'll get to the Black Album next, but anyways, so Master of Puppets, where do you rate it, Aaron?
It's a 10 out of 10. Master of Puppets is a flawless masterpiece. When you asked me earlier, would this be in my top 5? This one would be.
What number?
It would be probably 5, though.
Okay, so it's a top 5 or bottom.
Bottom 5, but definitely top 5.
But okay,
yeah. How about you?
So probably an 8.
What were you gonna say? I don't want to derail that train of thought.
It already happened. It crashed and burned. But
Bam.
8 for me.
Okay.
So these next two albums, are they on this top 5 list?
One of them is.
Okay, interesting. All right. Well,
but so what are the highlights of this album for you, though? Like, you talked a little bit about, like, we talked Battery, Fight Fire comparisons, but what else stands out to you on this one? Because I know you said Leper Messiah is probably...
It's going to sound cliche, but, you know, I have a hard time connecting with lyrics, but Master of Puppets is just a really great song, and I like the idea of, like, addiction personified.
Right.
It's kind of like that song's theme. And I really like how they did it. I like the song itself. And I know it's everybody's favorite song off that album, but I can see why. Like, it's hard to not follow that, like, you know, everybody loving it, but it is. And I feel like it is the highlight of that album, along with, you know, Welcome Home Sanitarium, Orion, like you said. Forgive me, I don't know all the names of them all.
Who didn't learn Master of Puppets on guitar? At least that section.
Oh, for sure.
It
makes you feel so cool.
It does. It sounds badass, you know.
It does.
And I was just curious. I wanted to know. But having said that, that will, you know, lead us into 1988, 2 years later.
And Justice for All.
Oof. What an album, too. 2 years. I like these 2 years now that they're doing.
An old music trope for sure.
It is like the sign the record deal every 2 albums are released. But I mean, maybe it gives you more time.
Well, and I think like there's no internet back then, so there's nothing to keep carrying your popularity. So you got to be album after album almost. You can't let focus be lost too quickly, and you know, the studio is going to be pushing you to come out with another album and match the same success. And speaking of matching fucking success, we go from 6 times platinum with Puppets to now 8 times platinum, 9,700,000 albums. Fucking
That's
wild.
Crazy.
Huge album too. And it put them on the trajectory for superstardom. Like they were big. They were big. But then here's Justice, and now they're fucking MTV is finally around, so you know, that's popping on the tube.
See, I heard they were having some trouble, or not trouble, but some disagreements with MTV because they didn't want to shoot the type of videos MTV wanted to post.
Oh yeah, that happened with a lot of artists.
So it's cool to see that they got One on there.
Yeah,
you know, which probably helped propel them, because One is one of their biggest songs, I would say.
Oh yeah,
everybody knows that song,
and that kind of probably helped with the overall album sales too, because you got to look at history and think before MTV, they had to promote with touring and album sales, record stores with posters, word of mouth. And then MTV comes along, and now you're seeing a TV channel where you can watch all these hard rock, metal acts, rock acts, pop acts, and that really helps propel them into a bigger bubble. And this is their first album with Jason Newsted, who's a great bass player, but that everyone knows that going into this album now. They know Cliff Burton's gone. They know there's going to be, 1/4 of the band has changed, and he's going to bring something new to the table. And I think Jason Newsted indeed does that. And one thing I want to kick off this album conversation with is, again, fucking killer album openers. They just keep doing it.
I wanted to bring that up. Blackened.
Blackened, dude,
is a great opener to this album.
It just shreds.
Also, I really love Harvester of Sorrow.
That's a great song.
A great freaking song. Yeah. Obviously one is good. I also like To Live Is To Die. Eye
of the Beholder is so sick too. One is a classic. This album is the one that really starts focusing on that like war PTSD deal. One in particular, and just one thing though, one negative thing.
Ooh, really?
It's widely known. It's an infamous thing, but because of their uncertainty with the new bass player, they kind of urged Flemming Rasmussen, and maybe he decided a little bit too, but to mix the bass down a little bit on this production. So it's been restored. You said you've been listening to the remasters.
Yeah.
So it's not something you probably would notice as much, even though you will if you go back and listen to that with that in mind. You can hear the bass mix is significantly lower than the rest of the band and on previous releases. And it was definitely a point of contention for a lot of fans. You could see comments these days, like on Reddit, if you go on there, and people will talk about the band and they'll say, oh, Justice can't even possibly be in their top 5 because there's no bass. You can't hear the bass.
It's funny. You said that, and I was just reading something about it. And I guess in 2019, Headsfield had mentioned that they mixed it low, not to belittle him, but they couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
They said they got off tour of a heavy metal tour, and they had everything turned up but bass. So they said they couldn't hear shit.
Yeah.
And
well, of course, 2019 James Hetfield was going to say that. But they had an infamous turmoil.
Really?
A weird brotherly relationship with Jason, and I think he can say that now. But if you watch old footage and old interviews and shit, I could see them being like, just turn him down for now.
Do you think it was just because they were so worried about him replacing Cliff?
I think it's probably a lot of things. I mean, that definitely is part of it. Uncertainty of his ability, even though he was hired, they're like, well, how will he stand out? Maybe we don't want to let him be too loud. I don't know. I know you can look up some interviews with Jason Newsted, and he gives his perspectives on it and shit. And I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons for it at the end of the day. I'm not saying I'm calling Hetfield a liar. That could be one of many explanations, but it's a very infamous thing. So I've heard a lot of different conflicting stories, and
so this is the third album, I believe, right, with Flemming?
The third and final.
Okay. Yeah. So do you think that's also part of it, just maybe why these 3 albums are so widely and highly regarded is because of who produced them? Like, he was able to kind of focus their energy in the right areas, where when they went and picked somebody later on, I know a lot goes into picking your producer because they're the ones who are supposed to bring your image to light, basically.
Yeah.
But,
well, that's the era of producers, though. That's the thing. So Flemming Rasmussen was huge for that time period. And he's brought in by Megaforce or whoever eventually signed their major label shit, Elektra. So he's he's their go-to person. You know, they're
Yeah.
like, we're going to use Fleming for this because we think he'll complement Metallica best. Bob Rock for the Black Album, which we'll talk about when we get there, was also a very famous rock producer. He'd worked with like Motley Crue and all these other bigger metal rock bands, and they bring him in for a different era of Metallica, like we talked about. So I do think Fleming is a huge influence on the decisions and stylistic choices of those three albums. And, you know, the band probably wanted to sound like that too. So you get that consensus. And yeah, magic in a bottle. Like I said, you can't duplicate certain things like that ever again. And that's something I miss about those days. I think since everyone can produce their own music on their laptops and shit now,
Yeah.
and, you know, production, there are still, like we were talking about Benny Blanco the other day, you know, there are still those names out there that are predominant. Dr. Dre is still a big one in the hip hop world. Honestly, I'm pretty out of touch with the rock world just because I feel like it's just not that exciting. Yeah, it's changed, and there are obviously exceptions, but I used to have my finger on the pulse a lot better with that type of shit.
Yeah.
But this era, I definitely remember, and production was a big fucking deal. You had your Flemings, you had your Ross Robinsons, your Terry Dates, your, you know, Bob Rocks, Mutt Lang. Yeah, those names, they stick out, they stick out. They all produced some of the most classic albums of the eras. And yeah, that's such a huge part of it. But going back to Justice, though, I'm curious, other than Blackened and Harvester of Sorrow, what are some other standouts for you, or overall, you know, opinions of the album? What is for Justice? Because
My opinion's great for Justice. Again, this is the second album I ever heard by them. I ever fully listened to again, and I'll listen to it again later on. Also, another shout out song is The Frayed Ends of Sanity. That was another great one. This album,
great song.
one thing good about the Metallica albums so far to this point is that they're not very long. The songs are long, but
boy, is that about to change.
I know, man. But in these early ones, it's nice because even though the song's like 6-7 minutes, there's only 9 of them, 10 of them, maybe 8.
Yeah,
so it's not that bad.
It's kind of like an epic piece when it's 8 minutes long. You know, like you're along for a little bit of a journey. It's not your standard 4-minute, 3-minute drive. It's like, all right, we got a lot of different moving pieces here, and at the end of the day, a lot of those songs are some of Metallica's most memorable. Master of Puppets, One, just shit like that, where they chose stylistically to record like a 7-8 minute track.
I mean, they're amazing at how they're able to carry it. You know, coming up with that long of a song, the riffs, the drums, everything, you know, like how much goes on in the song. That's got to be hard. Like, people have a tough time with 3-minute songs, like freaking 8 minutes and blaring guitar solos all throughout. Like,
yeah, if you
that's some technical shit, man.
If you look up how to play One online on the guitar, it'll show you 7 guitar parts, because they would layer, you know, James would do a layer, Kirk would do a layer, James would do another, Kirk would do 2 more. And it's crazy to think about, primarily when it gets to like the guitar solo sections, but it's pretty wild, you know. And I think at the time people weren't really ready for shit like that, but Metallica comes in and they present it to everyone on the radio and MTV at the time. Then you start seeing puppets in rotation during the Justice years because they're getting bigger. So, you know, then those songs are getting retroactively played on radio stations and MTV and VH1, and building an entire new fucking era of Metallica. And I think with that, it'll be time to drop our ratings for Justice. And I'm curious, what do you rate it?
I probably rated the same as Puppets, an 8.
Interesting. So when you asked me on the last album if this album was in the top 5 or if one of the next two, it's not this one.
Really?
No.
Oh, wow. What's
But
your rating?
I'd still give it like an 8.
Okay.
I like it a lot. It's
So-
great. It's a great album.
So what makes it not a 10 for you?
Not a ton of things, but the bass is one of those things. I
Okay.
think that it's not a widely known thing for, a fake reason. It's the bass thing is weird, and I don't know why they would choose to do that, because with Cliff being who he was on the previous albums, we should have felt Jason's presence the same way we felt Cliff's. And I think because of that, it lacks a little bit, but only a little bit. And I was also, so this might be unpopular, but we had Lightning, we had Puppets, now we have Justice. I wasn't exactly, again, these albums were already out once I started listening to them.
Yeah.
So there was no expectation for me, but I hadn't gotten to the Black Album yet. My dad, he's one of those people that feels the Black Album is kind of different Metallica. Not that it's bad, but these are the 3 albums he had. So I listened to these. I was already kind of tired of the thrash metal approach from them. I think it sounds great and they do it really well, but it's those like slower, more intricate parts in songs like One that I wanted to hear more of because it was interesting. It had that soft to heavy element,
Yeah.
And I think tracks like that stand out way more to me. And Puppets has that. And so at that point, I wanted to hear more of that artistic Metallica and not so much the fast thrash,
That's
metal up
understandable.
your ass shit.
That's what makes those type of songs good, is kind of the contrast from that slow to heavy metal again.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that kind of leads us into the next album, really.
That does lead us to the next album. But I thought for the first time ever on Deep Dive, we would take a little bit of a mid-roll break.
Ooh,
I don't know if it's necessarily the midway point of this episode,
definitely not.
but it might be. I don't know. Just depends. But this will be our first break, and in doing so, we wanted to take some time and talk about a fellow podcaster of ours.
We do.
He went out of his way to do us a solid and plug Deep Dive last week on his show. So we want to go ahead and do that for his show today.
Yeah, we do. I just want to say thank you for shouting us out. His name is Chris Fisher, and he actually does the Cinematic Magnification podcast. So check it out.
Yeah, check it out, and we'll be back right after this message.
Hello, I'm Chris Fisher and I'm the host of Cinematic Magnification. On my podcast, in each episode, I take exactly 5 minutes from a movie and I overanalyze it in excruciating detail. I go on rants, I go on tangents, I go into detail about anything I find even remotely noteworthy. Currently I'm doing The Incredibles, but who knows what movie I'm gonna be doing after that. If that sounds like something you'd listen to, please do give it a listen, I'd really appreciate it. I'll see you on my podcast, and until then, remember to drink enough water, and remember to stay incredible.
And we are back after that mid-roll break.
What do you think of that mid-roll break?
I thought it was great. I'm going to have to check out his podcast.
Same.
It sounds interesting.
It's definitely, I want to hear what he has to say about a 5-minute scene from The Incredibles.
Yeah, it seems unique.
Yeah.
Unique approach.
Haven't ever heard of anything like that, but anyways.
So here we are, 1991. Time for the self-titled album, really, if you want to get down to it.
That is true.
But it's actually
The Black Album.
that never really gets old.
It won't.
But this was the era of the self-titled albums. Lots of bands were doing it. Don't need to overthink nothing. We're just Metallica. It's like a relaunch into their new sound, interestingly enough. This is the album that makes Metallica a fucking household name, basically.
Yep.
Puts them right in the middle of everything. Rock, hard rock, metal, Metallica. 16 times platinum.
Oh my
16 times. 17,300,000 album sales.
17 million. That's so crazy.
This album, it's funny because it gets a lot of praise, a lot, and a lot of hate from that hardcore fan base of the old sound, but commercially, lots of praise. You know,
17 million records. Yeah, I'm gonna say a lot of praise. That's just a testament to Metallica. That was a good job for that.
yeah, absolutely. This is the hive mind.
Metallica sold out.
That's definitely what this album is. When I ever hear anything about Metallica, it's always kind of a battle between what the Black Album is, a great turning point for Metallica, or what turned them into nothing.
I think it's fucking great. It's a great fucking album, honestly.
It is a great album.
Heavier, more refined, precision songwriting, fantastic fucking production, interbob rock. Metallica's Black Album to me. It's a certified classic. I mean, I don't know how anyone could listen to this and hate it, even if you're a fan of that old thrash shit. You can't honestly tell me that these songs suck. I don't know how someone says that, honestly.
It would be hard to say that.
They're out there, man. Like there's that group of people that are just fucking so harsh on this stylistic change, and I think as a band you have to evolve. You cannot keep making the same fucking album over and over again. And I know I say that all the time, and I've even myself called some bands sellouts. And, you know, maybe this is selling out for Metallica, but I think it's the right thing for them to do for the era. Because in the 90s, I really don't think they'd still be like we talked about. I don't know that if Cliff was still around and they were hitting that hardcore thrash shit in the 90s, if that would have really worked.
Who knows if it would.
Commercially.
I mean,
they're never going to lose their fan base, but
the band themselves wanted a change too. I mean, they even, went on to say that they didn't want to do long form songs anymore. Like they did it to kind of prove themselves. And then now they just want to take a simpler approach, not do friggin' 9-minute songs.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing. And I mean, the stylistic change is just like you said, music evolves. And thrash metal, in my opinion, just wasn't as big, that could survive on. Like people look at it now and it's great, but how many thrash bands are there now that were able to make it as big as Metallica?
I mean, really just that big four.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other stragglers. I can't name any, but I know there's a couple others, but I agree. I don't think it's
place in time, but Metallica, I guess, maybe knew or felt the shift.
Yeah. And you gotta, this is they still had the long hair Metallica here with this album. This is the last album of that. And we'll get into that bullshit with the next one. But it still has that metal feel to them, though.
It does. It's really great.
They recorded a making of for this one as well. It's not widely distributed like Some Kind of Monster was, but there is like copies of it out there you can watch where the process is there and Bob Rock is giving them ideas and they're bouncing ideas off of him.
The music video for Nothing Else Matters, I think, is a montage of that stuff.
It is,
of what from clips from that movie.
And that movie's the first time you can actually see real turmoil between the members sometimes. Like there's a famous quote from that one I always like, and Lars is like, I want to hear it with lyrics, and he's like, James is like, if you want to hear it, then fucking sing it yourself or something like that. Like, it's just funny because you've been partying like a rock star for all these thrash years. You're fucking, now you're starting to get into their older, like I think mid 30s or
they're almost 30
or just about 30. Yeah,
they're 28.
Okay,
well, Hetfield's 28.
So there's changing. They've been doing the partying, and in '91 they're still fucking doing it, definitely. Because you watch like live shit, Binge and Purge, which is another one of their. That's how we'll do the live stuff. Is we just got to shout it out, but we couldn't cover all of it. But live shit, Binge and Purge has got like a lot of that shit, a lot of the Black Album era shit coming out, so you can see that they're still the party animals, the drinking 12 beers on stage while they play. That's not really changed for them, but they've matured greatly in their outlooks and shit. And I think you can really feel that on this album.
Absolutely.
And Enter Sandman. Who fucking doesn't know that song? You know,
I
mean,
don't know anybody.
Yeah,
The riff is amazing just to start out. Just
yeah,
it hooks you right then and there.
and it's heavy. It's a heavy song. Like, it's just people want it to be fast and heavy, but it's like, look, it's a heavy song. There's lots of those songs on there, like "Don't Tread on Me." That song is pretty fucking heavy. One of my second favorite song by Metallica ever is probably "Nothing Else Matters." That song is just it just hits me.
It is a great song.
And there's a lot of like conflict on this album with James. I don't know if you noticed it, but lyrically he's really evolving. And his mom had just died.
Yeah, The God That Failed.
Yep, The God That Failed. I was just going to bring that song up.
You know, that's why he has his issue with religion a little bit, because his mom was the Christian Science and you know something along that line. And
it's a great song, dude. That song is fucking so badass. Like, it just hits you. You know, it hits you. The whole album does that. It's epic.
It's funny. I feel like every band does a touring song.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Nothing Else Matters is, you know, James kind of dealing with being gone all the time. Like, his relationship suffers. Blink-182, Adam's song is the same.
Yeah.
It's Mark talking about him dealing with his depression on tour, stuff like that. So,
and it's funny with Nothing Else Matters, like it's his struggle with touring, but the song is written in such a way where you can relate to it with your own personal shit.
Yep.
And that's what I mean by them like evolving, where you were kind of saying earlier on, you have a hard time connecting. They got so much better at being universally understood. Like, we're communicating these emotions and these feelings in a way now that almost everyone connect. And that's where you get that 17 million albums sold.
Plus, also, this is the first time I can really remember James singing.
Without his
normal affectations and stuff like that. You know, like just him singing, because he does on Nothing Else Matters, and he kind of slowly goes into what he normally does, and it's a nice transition. And I appreciate it more when he does it, but he sounded good just singing, and it kind of showed a different side of Metallica.
And that's why I think, and this will be unpopular, but that's why I think 91 and forward Metallica, for me, is better overall than thrash era Big Four Metallica, because they all got better. You know, people will shit on Lars, but Lars does his job. He does his job perfectly in the band as a drummer, and he hits hard, and he fits those tones. And when James is singing his heart out, he's fucking hitting those skins as hard as he can, and it makes everything stand out. Kirk's solos, James's raw emotion. He has a great voice when he wants to sit and sing and match with the music, you know. And I don't think people appreciate it enough. Maybe they do. I don't know. I know, like I said, rhythm guitar player wise, I think he's top 5 of all time. But
see, I think after this album, for me, Metallica doesn't hit. Like, might be their high point for me on albums. Relatable.
Yeah.
Like, I feel Load and Reload, I did not have any type of. Fuck, man, I didn't know what was going on that album.
I couldn't disagree more.
Same with Saint Anger.
Yeah.
No idea what the fuck's going on those albums. But,
well, we'll get to that.
But
we'll get to that.
No, I think the writing on this album's great. The album's a little bit longer than what they normally do, but
still great. Not their longest.
No.
Crazily enough.
No, it's not. I can think of one already.
I can tell you the one, but we're only one away from it anyway, so.
It's a great album. It had a lot of singles, and the album spanned a few years. They first released the first single in 91 and the last in 93.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and there wasn't even a follow-up until this. You were talking about how you like the 2-year gaps.
Yeah.
This one goes to 5. Yeah. Which is wild.
Which stylistically, I don't understand. I don't understand at all. Load
Well,
in comparison to Black Album, like
I think
I understand the changing times and like trying to grow, and they took some time off. So who knows what they did in that time?
yeah,
I don't know if they took time off or what they did in the 5-year span between albums, but you know,
they toured religiously.
and that was when they did the S&M, right?
Yeah, I believe
Right
so.
between these two.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, who knows what was going on outside of touring, like what they were listening to, but I just feel like I can see kind of the change and the direction from Injustice for All. But
Yeah.
I don't feel the same thing from Black Album to Load.
Interesting. And did you get a chance to listen to Garage Days?
I listened to some of it, yeah.
Because like I said, like the first half of it was recorded background Justice time.
Mhm.
Second half is recorded right in between like this and Load and Reload kind of. But yeah, I think Garage Days always needs a bigger shout out than it gets, because while it is all covers, those songs sound like they could be Metallica songs with the way they do them. And I think they do covers in a way that a lot of people will try to do carbon copies, but Metallica kind of makes them their own. And I love that about them. I think there's a lot of notable songs on Garage Days. So I'm just going to slip Garage Days right in there. And that'll be it for that, because I know we just try to stick to the core shit, but I had to shout out that shit. I had to shout out Garage Days. I like it. It's good shit.
Good stuff for them.
Yeah. Well, I guess we won't spend tons of time on the Black Album, because that album kind of speaks for itself in a lot of ways.
It does.
17 million albums sold.
Woo.
You want to tell me Metallica sucks? I'm going to tell that to the Black Album. But with all that said, that brings us to our rating of the Black Album.
What do you rate it, Aaron?
Well, it's my number one favorite album of all time by them. And it's the album that I was talking about when you were like, is it in the next two? This is that album. Very unpopular opinion, I know, but Black Album is my favorite. I relate to the whole album a great deal, because a lot of it reminds me of my own personal shit. And when it's heavy, it's fucking heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's soft, it's beautiful. And it's just a poignant album for Metallica, and I give it a perfect 10. Perfect 10.
Perfect. Probably 8.5.
Really?
I like it a lot, but again, for Metallica, it's good. It's got everything there, but it's just not. Hetfield's voice is just better, but I still I can't get past it, you know, like you have to have
this fucking guy.
You have to have like, if you listen to a band, you have to like the singer, how they sing, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why Metallica, no matter how much I like their stuff, and even though I give it an 8, it's because it is good. And once I get past, you know, his voice and all that stuff, you know, it's very enjoyable. It's great. But it still will always throw me off. I don't listen to a lot of people because I don't like their voice.
That's
no matter how good they are, I don't care.
Yeah,
if I don't like it, that's a big reason why I don't like a lot of older music like this. Not so much Metallica or anything like that, but like if we go to like the hair metal, like Poison and stuff like that, don't care for that.
I don't really like Poison, but I mean, I like bands from that era.
Yeah. I just don't connect with how they sing or anything like that. It's just never been my thing.
I can't wait. I can't wait to hear the conversations that will be had about things like that, like the hair metal era, which we won't cover. You know, we'll probably do a deep dive just on that genre, and then a couple select bands from them. Yeah. We're not going to fucking cover everything, because that's just,
I don't know if I could.
Fuck that. But with that said, you know, we're definitely going to be doing bands like Motley Crue, and they're in that shit.
They
right
are
there.
in that
So-
shit for sure.
Because I don't love Motley Crue, but I think the purpose of Deep Dive should be, we talk about the great shit, but Metallica is one of the best in their field, and then Motley Crue, their early shit anyway, they were one of the best in their field. So I think we can't not talk about the Crew, but
You're not
yeah,
wrong.
I mean that kind of shocks me. But let's get into the real controversial shit then. Let's get into.
Hold up. What does my rating shock you?
Yeah, I mean, all of your ratings have kind of shocked me because you don't really seem to like Metallica on the whole, but these ratings are still relatively high, which speaks to what we're doing here at Deep Dive. You're being kind of unbiased and saying like, look, it's not really for me, but
It's not. It's
I put it
just-
at this point.
I put him so high up because, like I said, outside of his voice and stuff, and a lot of times I don't connect with their lyrics, everything's there for me.
Hmm.
Like, even if they put out like just instrumentals of these songs, I'd listen to it.
Yeah.
Maybe
And
I'd like it
They
even
do
more.
that sometimes on deluxe versions where you can just hear stuff without jams. Yeah,
And maybe I'd like it more.
maybe.
I don't know. And it's and just to throw it out there so you guys know what I really mean, the Unforgiven 3 off Death Magnetic is my favorite Metallica song of all time.
Oh, yeah.
I think he sounds
Yeah.
peak of
forgot
what I
about
would
that.
love for him to just sound like. His singing is really good. He throws in his like affectations that he does when he sings, but they're not overly used. He sounds good.
Mhm.
The song's meaning, I love the meaning of the Unforgiven series,
Mhm.
but the third one and just the start with the piano, just the solo, everything.
Mhm.
It's a perfect song for me. But
Yeah, I should also be fucking taken out back and for talking all about that album and not bringing up The Unforgiven, the start of the three.
that
song
is
set.
true. The
So,
Unforgiven. What
Yeah.
do you love it as much as everybody else? Like as far as like them deciding to make it this trilogy and like
I like that song a lot, and I don't know that I would have personally done 3 parts to it. But with that said, I think all 3 parts are good.
yeah,
I like them all. I mean, 2 almost didn't even happen for the public, but we'll get there.
and I like to a lot.
Yeah.
It's one of the few songs off Load and Reload
Mhm.
that I really like. And I used to listen to that song
Mhm.
because
That's
I
weird.
really like the style of that one.
I think musically and production wise and everything, I prefer part 2 the best.
Really?
Yeah. The first one's classic. The second one is, I think, perfect. And the third one is a nice close off. I don't want to hear Unforgiven 4 though. I think we should just
I think,
leave it
yeah.
at 3. You know?
I think 3 perfectly capped it off because, again, it's my favorite song by Metallica.
Yeah.
But you are right. We're about to get to a bit of a controversial era for Metallica.
Pretty much the rest of the episode is, I mean, it's relatively died down with the last 2 albums, but
Yeah.
the controversy is going to ride for the next 4 albums or
Probably.
so.
So
Let's do it.
lead us
Let's
into
get
it
to it.
out. Let's see
Well, 1996.
Load.
That thing just works really well.
It's so good.
A very divisive album, but one I love. Probably, in that top 5, it would go Black
Really?
Album, Load, Master is 5, like we talked about.
No
I love
way.
Load.
Really?
Load is a great fucking album. I wasn't the only one because even though it waned down in popularity quite a bit, still went 5 times platinum, still sold 5,400,000 copies. Very different Metallica. Now the hair is cut.
Yes.
This is
seen
the
that.
short-haired Metallica, the black fingernail Metallica, the dark Metallica. And I think before we even get into this album, we got to talk about that because 91, they hit the studio to record the Black Album. They were still very much in 80s mode. 91 is not that far into the 90s.
Nope.
The culture hadn't quite shifted just yet. So we got Metallica adapting to what they were kind of perceiving as the new sound of the 90s. But with Load, they've had a little bit of time to see where the 90s is and where they're going to fit. And I think that's why we get some of the stylistic choices that we get here. I do want your reaction to this little fact.
Okay.
That the cover to Load is a mixture of all of the bandmates' blood and semen and then splashed up into a picture like that. And that's why it's called Load. It's literally Load. The look on your face is priceless, which is what I was hoping for. You also sound kind of speechless, which is funny.
So looking at this fucking album cover right now, I'm just looking at their fucking babies.
Yeah, baby blood, basically.
Baby,
It's metal. That's metal as fuck.
I'll metal this fist into his fucking face.
Who's he? They were all like fucking,
all of them.
It was probably Bob Rock's idea. I don't know.
I will fucking punch them. I don't want to be looking at some other four other men's semen and blood in a picture. You fucking bastards. Fucking
just,
pretty rock, but fucking bastards.
It was probably Lars's idea, actually, if I can speculate, because he's into art. He in some kind of monster, they show him selling off like his art collection. So he's into that abstract shit. So it was probably at the core, probably something he brought up and they ran with. Yeah, Kamart. Art. Lars Ulrich's Kamart.
Kamart, come buy my art. It's Kamart.
So 1996, Load. I know it's kind of a shell-shocking transition. If I can reference Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a little bit shell-shocking for you.
It was. In fact, if you remember, I texted you during one of the songs when I first got on Load, and I was like, what the fuck am I listening to?
You're listening to fucking Metallica mid-90s, baby. That's what you're listening to.
Yeah, they're more of not the Metallica I remember, or where they left off from Black Album. See, I just don't see the connect from this album to Black Album at all. I can see that Black Album tried to do something different for Metallica, but then they were like, who the fuck is Metallica? We're fucking Metallica. And
the connection is in the production and the approach. Like, Metallica's Black Album is the first to hear them do a lot more down tuning in their guitars to get that heavier, slower, like real grindy sounding metal, and Load still has all of that. The difference is Load starts to add that alternative sound as well as that maybe southern twang that really never appeared again. It's really only on Load and Reload. I personally like it. I think it's a very interesting stylistic choice, which probably only further pissed hardcore Metallica fans off.
If someone's a fan of Kill 'Em All, they would fucking want to kill 'em all if they heard this fucking album.
Yeah, like I said, it's not as well received. I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's what, 5 million versus 17 million. That's a 12 million album drop in sales. And we're talking at the height of CD releases too. So this album did not do as commercially well for Metallica, but it maintained their stature. And at the time, it was pretty slept on. Like, nobody was that stoked about this. I was 11 at the time, and it's coincidentally the first Metallica album I ever owned.
I was 5.
Yeah. Interesting.
You know,
and that plays a huge factor into this shit, you know, like it's not nostalgia, but it's just like you were there when it was out. So you're here, you've heard all the shit that's happening in the 90s. Like I said, we're coming in pretty hot off of grunge's basically dead now. Black Album came out at grunge's birth-ish. Load is pretty much leading us into the new metal era in a lot of ways. I don't know if I don't see Load get mentioned in that regard, but I do feel a little.
I feel it.
Yeah.
I see how new metal could have spawned from this type of album.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stylistic choices I didn't agree with on this album.
Until It Sleeps. Like, you don't like that song?
I'll tell you what I do like about this album.
When it was over?
Ended. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured you were going to say some shit. This is their longest album.
Yeah, I saw that at about 78 minutes.
Yeah.
It has some okay songs. The one I text you about was Hero of the Day.
A good standout.
The House Jack Built.
Mm-hmm.
Mama Said. And that was about it. And those songs, when I say those are standouts, it doesn't stand out. It's still the corn in the shit.
That's wild. That's wild. But I'm not surprised, again, like I talked about. Most of my friends don't even like Metallica, and they definitely don't like this Metallica.
This album was... So here's the thing, too. As far as his voice goes, he did a lot more of what I said I would like. Yeah. You know, a lot less of his, grungy sound he does, or whatever raspy... What did you call it earlier?
His yarl.
His yarl. His yarl. Like, he kind of tones it down a bit on this one. Like, there are parts where he still brings it out, but he sings a lot more.
Yeah.
So it's weird that I got a bit of what I wanted, but everything else went to shit around it for me. Like, it's...
I don't know.
It's so why do you love it so much, Aaron? Outside of, like you said, you were there when it happened, but what about this album that stands out so much to you where everybody else stands on it?
I just like the songs a lot. Like, that's all it comes down to at the end of the day with any album.
No, for sure.
I fucking love, Ain't My Bitch. It's such an unconventional song, but that's one of the reasons I like it. It's an outside the box kind of Metallica. 2x4, I really love that. House that Jack Built. King Nothing, I love that song. It was just, I like darker shit. I am into the darker versions of all shit. And I feel personally like Black Album, Load, Reload, Hardwired, those are the darkest sounding Metallica albums to me. And that's what I like. I'm into that with every band. Like, if I'm into them, I'll always like all their shit. But the darker sounding shit, that's what I want.
I'm with you on that, but I want to say the opposite for Load and Reload. I don't think the tone was as dark as Black Album, and especially like how you pointed out, the kind of country twang to it sets it into a tone for me that's not as dark.
That's all just opinion, though.
It is all just based opinion, but that country twang and just the stylistic choices of the album, and
because I think that country twang that they're doing sounds more eerie, and I think you hear it a little bit more on the Reload end.
Maybe on Reload, because Unforgiven 2
or Memory Remains, like those songs are dark and weird, but we'll get to those. I think Load, it gets too much hate. I think, and you're hating on it right now, and I get it, but I think it gets just too much hate. I mean, do I respect your opinion though? Yeah. Like I said, this is an opinion I hear often. This is not new for me anyway.
It's just, coming in, I've never listened to Reload or Load or Reload in their entireties ever. I couldn't even name any of these songs off Load. I'm looking at all the singles they released over the year long that they had, and I couldn't tell you how one of them goes, really.
None of those songs were as big as the hits that you know them for. Like I said, we're talking, like I said, 12 million record cut.
What do you think happened? Why didn't this album do as well just initially off the bat, like 5 years after Black Album, after just destroying themselves into the stratosphere?
All the things you don't like about it.
But I mean, a lot of people don't hear the album at first. especially back then, it was a lot harder to hear stuff outside of a single or two.
Well, that's why is "Ain't My Bitch" one of the singles?
No.
2x4.
No.
Weird. What are the 4 singles?
Until It Sleeps, Hero of the Day, Mama Said, and King Nothing.
So, like, Until It Sleeps, I think is in a very similar tone to Nothing Else Matters. It's that slow, soft to hard thing. And I think that's what they were probably trying to play into. But again, they took such a nosedive in terms of their sound for people.
Absolutely.
And Bob Rock. So we got to talk about Bob Rock here. Bob Rock was good for Metallica for the Black Album. Okay. And then he gets progressively worse for the band. And this is me stepping outside, me liking Load and just saying the truth.
Yeah.
And the truth is, Bob Rock fucked Metallica up. You know, they changed them for what a lot of people would say, or he changed them for what a lot of people would say is their worst. He did things to them and their sound that no one could have foreseen. And that's what I was kind of saying about Cliff. I don't think Cliff would have went for a lot of this shit. And I don't think they necessarily wanted to go for it either, but we're talking about, like I said, much older, mature Metallica. They want that money. They have families now. They want to keep matching the same success. So they're going to listen to their producer, Bob Rock, who has produced, like, at the time, like 30 fucking platinum albums. They're not really going to question him, especially when the last endeavor they had with him was 17 million strong.
Super successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that those things play a factor. But to hone back to everything you don't like about the album, those are the reasons. Those are straight up the reasons. And with where rock and metal were in the 90s, they weren't as big. We started to see hip hop become more into the forefront here. This is the start of the downhill slope of rock and metal. So it's not just Metallica at the time. You know, the next big resurgence of metal or rock is bands that you also don't really like Korn and shit like that.
Yes.
Who were influenced by, that's why I brought the new metal influence up. You know, they were into this shit, but Korn is like right around the corner from here. Like literally right around the corner.
No, absolutely.
So
that's why I said I could hear the, new metal where everybody got it from. Load and Reload might not be very popular and hated, but they did help spawn a new genre of music and metal.
Yeah.
Because you can definitely hear the connections. And the first thing I thought of when I was listening to this album was Korn.
Well, they love Metallica, and they even covered one on one of their live things or their greatest hits album. So, and who doesn't love Metallica is my point. Like you'll be hard pressed to find a popular rock or metal band that does not toss Puppets or Justice in their they influenced us greatly. And those who are honest with themselves maybe might even remember Load and Reload more fondly than they like to admit. But that's why I like bands like Spirit Box. They've come right out and said, I don't know if you know much about them, but they're like the off-branch band of I Wrestled a Bear Once.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I know Spirit Box is.
Courtney LaPlante, or whatever her fuck her name is, that beautiful, amazing voiced woman, she has come out and said that they're big nu metal fans, and their newest songs sound so fucking nu metal, and I'm here for it because I love that genre, and I like to see it having a little bit of a resurgence right now. And she brings up Metallica, and she brings up Korn, and she brings up those bands. So it's really cool. That's how I feel about Load. I'm very sad to hear that it did not deliver for you. For me, it's a motherfucking certified classic.
Didn't.
I love Load. Like I said, I get into this conversation with all of my fellow Metallica haters. And, well, not fellow haters, but friends who are haters. I'm a supporter. I love those motherfuckers. I give Load a 9.
Whoa!
I love it. It's my second favorite album by them.
Second favorite album.
Black Album and Load.
So crazy.
I just love the songs, man. I love those songs. Well, it's gonna blow your mind even more as we go forward because we're fucking 3 albums. You got 3 of my top 5s. So
I know Lulu's gonna be number 1.
Lulu
Lulu's gonna
belongs
top them all.
on the ground
But,
with turds fucking all over that bitch.
Turds in your top
Set
5
on
with
fire.
Load.
Lulu is garbage. It's the hottest garbage of all time.
Lulu's got the semen all over it. You love on Load.
I'll take that album cover over Lulu any goddamn day of the week. So what's your rating then? You obviously did not favor this album.
4.
A 4?
Yeah, it's a 4.
Damn.
This
all right.
album I will never listen to in its entirety again.
Wild.
It will never happen again. In fact, it's hard pressed for me to even listen to one song from that album ever again. I didn't listen to them really, I don't think ever, and I never will again.
Damn. Well, I mean, I get it. I'm not judging because again, that's a pretty normal opinion.
And here's the thing is that, I didn't know what to expect.
Well, I'm sure you didn't expect it to be my number 2. I'll tell you that shit.
Because it's number 2.
Number 2 at the bottom shit list.
Now, there's too many other shitty Metallica albums for that, in my opinion, personally. But
Man.
well,
But, I mean, yeah,
right.
4, and yeah, I'll never listen to it again, and I probably would have been better off never listening to it now.
damn, that's quite the write-up. Well, I guess that will lead us directly into 1997's
Reload. We sound like we're on the radio. About to reload.
3 times platinum,
It's still,
4,480,000 albums sold.
for how much I dislike Load, I mean, it's still a 5 platinum album.
Yeah.
So, for whatever I say, there's still 5 million people who are like, fuck yeah. And same with Reload. There's still 4 million people who are like, fuck yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe. Just because they bought it don't mean they were satisfied with it.
They were fucking duped.
I mean, we don't need to really say a ton about Reload because, like I told you before we hit record, Reload, just leftover songs from Load. 1 year later, they were like, hey, these are all cuts that actually were still pretty good that made up another album, which is where we get Unforgiven 2 from, which is wild. But and we may not have gotten it had it wasn't been for that. But I mean, so I'm assuming you feel the same way about Reload because it ain't all that different.
No, it's not. But the Unforgiven 2 is actually, I like it better than the first one.
But what about like Fuel?
It's just, no.
You don't like that song?
I didn't care for anything on the album. None of these songs stood really out to me at all.
Huh. Not
Like
even like Memory Remains? Nothing?
No.
That does nothing for you?
No.
Man, it just, those songs remind me the most of like the Black Album era. So it's like, I don't know.
To be
Wild.
fair, I didn't even know that I had switched to Reload. Like when I was listening to them, because I put all the albums in my playlist and I
Right.
started from, first, and, I constantly check and I can hear changes.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear it in Reload, but it makes sense because you said they're leftover songs.
Yeah.
So totally the album's the same almost, but no, the Unforgiven 2 is actually a standout song. I like the lyrics to that song. I do like the way he sings it. Again, he sings it, doesn't yarl it.
Yep.
So it is kind of baffling to me that as far as one of my biggest critiques of Metallica, they give that to me in Load and Reload, but everything else, like I said, just doesn't stand to par.
Mm-hmm. Wild. But not that wild. Like I said, this is pretty
I guess not.
for me.
So my question is, does Reload land with you the same that Load does?
For the most part, I think it should have just been a double album because I would have liked it all the same.
Yeah.
I think in contrast, though, with both albums, there are songs that could have just been weeded out and made one ultimate Load or something. Or
Yeah.
But,
The ultimate Load.
yeah. The
Ultimate low.
But yeah, you gotta take the good with the bad, and I think while a lot of people find this stuff bad, I think it's pretty good. That doesn't mean Reload is in my top 5. I do think it's a little less good, but it has such a good amount of standout tracks still. Like I personally love Fuel and Memory Remains and Unforgiven 2 and shit. So they're there, but yeah, it's understandable. And really, I mean, with what everyone came to love with Metallica, I can see if I was a little bit older and I had been around for the albums as they were releasing, I definitely would have been pissed with everybody else probably. But, you know, just the way I discovered music at the time, I hadn't really fallen into any of that shit yet, so I kind of just took it as it came to me. And that's, I think, why I largely don't judge music the same way a lot of people do. And I approach it in more of a like, you know, this is the era it came out in, and I kind of try to keep all that stuff into my mindset. Because when these albums came out, Pearl Jam was topping the charts. So, you know, Load and Reload, depending on your outlook, Load and Reload aren't all that bad. I love Pearl Jam, but I can, you know, I'm just saying. Some people don't like the grunge era or the alternative rock.
It's a different...
Or vice versa with, you know, metal. So it's really just your opinion at the end of the day, which is all we're really talking about. But Reload, 8 out of 10. Give it just a slightly less.
Yeah, probably gets a 5 because Unforgiven 2
gets that 1 point boost because of that.
Song is really good. Like, for a pile of shit, they got one really good song that stands out. And it stands out because to me, that's the only song out of the 2 back-to-back albums that does sound like something older mixed with new. Like what I would imagine more of their sound to sound like evolving from Black Album as opposed to whatever it is they were doing.
Interesting. Well, it is worth noting that these are the last 2 albums with Jason Newsted, who wanted to do side projects and shit like that, and James was very vocally like, no, Metallica is your only focus and your only band. And that's why Jason left, because he wanted to go do other bands and shit. And
why do you think it's like that?
I mean, I get both sides. I get wanting to be maybe more artistic or stylistic and have a bigger say in the songwriting process. And, you know, Jason, he had said a lot of the time that he never really felt like a full member, even after all those years. And that happens for lots of bands.
Oh, for sure. Especially when you got core members like that. And you're
and
always
I'm sure
going to be the odd man out.
It's no secret that James and Lars are not exactly, when they're younger or like their early 30s, are not the nicest dudes. Their ego is definitely there. They're still drinking heavily. You know, this is right before James got clean the first time. And, you know, you're probably not thinking straight when you're Metallica and you're one of the fucking biggest bands in the world, and your bass player comes to you and they're like, hey, it's not enough for me. And I could see James being like, what do you mean it's not enough? We're fucking Metallica. We're a goddamn household name. You know, it's us or nothing. And I could get that mentality if I can tap into that ego. But from Jason's perspective, you know, you should be able to go out and spread your wings and do something else. And I think
they bullied him into coming on that cover for Load, and he didn't like that. He didn't like that.
Yeah, and just like Cliff, Jason was pretty similar to Cliff in a lot of ways. Like, he didn't really want to cut the hair. He didn't want to change. There's interviews with them where he talks about them cutting their hair and having families now, and them being just, you know, not all about the music the way he wanted them to still be. So that's probably where you get that shit.
Single and hairy forever.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
But for me, you can't stay stagnant, like I said. So would I want 10 more albums that sounded like the Black Album? No, because then the Black Album would not be as special. And that's kind of how I feel about Load and Reload. But let's get into some shit. In 2003,
oh god,
now having lost Jason Newsted and Heat just fucking omitting from Bob Rock, we're going down with
Saint Anger, piece of shit.
Oh, almost kind of felt like Pazuzu in The Exorcist right there, but
kind of sounded like it. Thought your head was gonna spin.
Hell yeah, that would have been sick for the episode.
So sick. Of course, I don't have a camera out for this.
Pull a Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice. Listen to the fucking episode.
Yes, Mr. Juice.
Fuckers. Anyway, Saint Anger.
So hold on. 6 years. 6 years go by.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Only 2 times platinum, too, with 2 million albums.
Well, it's another pile of garbage.
It is. This one I do agree is a shit show.
Why?
Well, largely Bob Rock, largely James Hetfield's out of control, just the worst he's ever been, in his alcoholism and needing to go into rehab. And that's what Some Kind of Monster kind of documents. They go into the studio right before he goes to rehab, and they start recording what we never got to hear of Saint Anger. And then during that recording process, he leaves, goes to rehab, postpones the album production. So tensions are high with Lars, with Kirk, with Bob. They're aching to get this album done, but James has got to go away to rehab. So that postponing really affects where they were going.
Yeah.
So James comes back, and hey, we got to get this album out. So Bob Rock's fucking genius idea here is to produce this album like they're a garage rock band recording an album for the first time, but that band is Metallica. And that's literally word for word, verbatim what he says in Some Kind of Monster. That was his approach for the production of this. And I think the new metal stuff we talk about, horribly done on this album. I think this is where it really starts to fucking ooze bullshit.
This album, I cannot.
It's a shit show.
I cannot with this fucking album, dude. Saint Anger, the title song, Saint Anger, sucks.
Terrible.
Sucks.
Saint Anger around my neck.
Yeah. Please sing it again, my friend. But let's.
Saint Anger. It doesn't work. So like old
Dracula. I like a fucking bad opera.
It was extremely polarizing when it came out. Like, nobody is a fan of this album, really. You'll find your hardcore Metallica enthusiasts, like myself, that will be like, I like a couple songs on it. And I do like a couple songs on it, but
it's just got a real garbage tone to it.
Well, especially unplugging Lars's snare the way they do. That does not help, which is weird, but you can hear it. It sounds like he's just fucking hitting a trash can through the whole fucking album. Which is weird because they had recorded a song called I Disappear that was on the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack at the time. And it has the same exact production. His snare is still unplugged, but the song sounds a lot better than everything on this album. I don't know if you've ever heard that song.
I can't think of it. I love Mission Impossible 2, though.
You've probably heard the song. I think it's in the credits or some shit, but
probably.
It's for that movie that they did the song, and that song is sick.
So,
and I was just hoping the whole album would be like that, and it's not.
I'm curious, is this Saint Anger is during the time that they did the South Park Bigger, Longer, Uncut stuff for them?
The little boy, you're going to hell. I think that was just like a side thing, but it is during this. Isn't Bigger, Longer, and Uncut's like 1999, isn't it?
I thought it was 01.
Maybe. I would double check that.
Yeah.
Fact checker. Let's see what we got. Yeah. It would be great when we actually get a fact checker and we, don't have to stumble around like idiots in between finding out the information. 1999.
Yeah.
So this was really before that.
But it was right after Load and Reload.
Yeah.
So, anyways, but yeah, I knew this album was critically panned even before I really knew Metallica. This album was just shit talked by everybody.
And that's why I think Some Kind of Monster is a good companion piece, because you can really see why this album turned out this way. They hired a counselor. Their inner turmoil is just off the fucking charts. Bob Rock is, they're kind of over his shit, but they're like, all right, well, again, he's given us these platinum albums, so we'll still try what he wants to try. They're kind of on board. That movie's great, though. Like, it's
how
good.
Disappointing would it be to be Metallica and see the decline in your career?
It's a tough question. I don't know. I've never been successful and then lost it like that. So
I know, but it's got to be hard. Like,
not losing it. Let's just be real here. They can drop shit albums and still sell out arenas. They're Metallica. They have name recognition. People want to go see Metallica.
Absolutely, I would love to.
Same. I've never seen them either, which is wild.
you see this decline, you think you'd want to change something like Load and Reload. Obviously, got a 5 times and a 3 times, which isn't bad, but it's still a decline. So why would they do something like Saint Anger with Saint Anger's?
Let's not undersell those albums. 5 million and 3 million, you'd be hard pressed to find any artist, even Taylor Swift, to hit those fucking numbers again.
But coming off of 17.
No, it is a wild drop. It is a wild drop. At least
the first 3, those big 3, up until Black Album were consistently better.
Mm-hmm.
And then Black Album just skyrocketed. So we'll call Black Album like an anomaly.
Yeah.
But even in that sense, Load and Reload are still failures. If we go by number looks, like even if you always are a failure in music numbers if you can't top what you've topped. So if your best song is from your first album, every other album after that will be a failure if it doesn't meet the numbers.
No, yeah. And I mean, again, you can't guarantee that, that you're going to hit the same heights no matter what you do.
True, but
I mean,
Metallica just had this great trajectory, and I just don't know for me what. I know for you, Load, they still were hitting it, but it just, I just don't see. Like I said, I'm missing this disconnect in sound in the 5 years, right? 5 years it was between them.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know what happened in this such stylistic change.
I think it's important with a band like Metallica to step back and think about all of the most popular bands of all time and realize that none of them were ever on point forever. They all wrote it big. They all had their declines. Some of them have had their comebacks, but it doesn't happen for everyone. There's that wave, you ride it, and then you hope you're good forever. But as we see with Saint Anger's album sales, 2 times platinum, 2 million sold, it's not very good for Metallica. It's pretty shitty.
In general, I mean, that's a failure for them.
For them. For anybody else, it would be fucking catastrophic success.
Absolutely.
But that's what's wild
Metallica,
about it,
It's just, and that's what we're kind of just comparing themselves to is themselves.
Yeah.
And not like bringing in anybody else. And that's where I think, we don't have to be so soft about it because, we're not like comparing Korn and System of a Down. We're comparing them against themselves. And
right.
It just seems, I mean, like you said, probably a lot of alcoholism, ego went into why their albums weren't as good later on.
Well, yeah. And we see it. We see it with that movie. You can feel that tension building.
We'll definitely have to watch that.
Yeah.
Like, sit down together and just watch it.
Maybe we'll do a side dive on that one. We'll watch it and then we'll side dive it, and then you can get your perspectives on it and kind of see what I mean. Because there's a moment in the movie where Lars explodes at James and he's like, we're a fucking rock band. He's like, I don't need all these rules and regulations about how to make my fucking rock and roll. So, it's like, and with any band, you got 4 different personalities going into a room, wanting the same outcomes, but going about it different ways. And like I said, they can't all be zingers. I think that comparing their old work to their new work is never fair for any band, because again, you're evolving as people. We've talked about it with Eminem. I can't wait till we do the Eminem episode, because I think this is really going to be, we bring him up a lot. That's why we did Metallica, because we may want to put that to bed. Maybe we won't bring up Metallica as much, because we bring him up in like every goddamn episode.
Well, you have to.
At least I do.
Rock bands.
Yeah, I mean, they're massive, and you got to bring up Eminem in the rap realm too.
Mm-hmm.
But he's gone through the same thing. Look at him, his 3-album run, and then Encore is panned, Relapse is panned, then he's kind of back with Recovery. And it's like every artist deals with it. So Metallica, yeah, they're really no different. It's very low on my list. This album wouldn't touch a top 10 Metallica albums. I'd put fucking S&M and Garage Days in there way before I'd ever mentioned Saint Anger.
Saint what?
Saint Anger.
Saint Anger. It's angering.
How bad this album was.
It's bad, and I'm not going to sit here and defend it. In fact, up until later in my life, I wouldn't even tell you I like some songs on it. That's really only happened in the last 5 years, maybe. I fucking have hated this album religiously, but I recently reacquired it on vinyl, gave it a spin. I do like a couple tracks. I do like the idea that Bob Rock had. I just don't think it worked. I don't think it sold it. I think if you tried that with a different band, it might be fucking lightning in the bottle, like we've said a few times. You know, like, hey, let's take Korn and record them like they're recording their first album in a garage. That might work for Korn's more raw sound. But we're talking about Metallica here, who has made a reputation on being one of the most polished, hard-hitting metal bands out there. And then you fucking drop Saint Anger on the table, and it polarizes basically everybody. Again, though, it does have its niche fan base.
It does. And credit where credit's due. I don't have any for this one because it can suck it. In fact, I'm not even sure, fully if this album helped progress rock at all.
It didn't.
Like,
rock was stagnant at this point.
Like, it didn't push anything forward like Metallica's normally does, can do, and it's kind of sad, and that's probably why, not that they aren't good, I mean, but it's probably a big reason why, like, System of a Down and Korn shine so much.
Yeah.
Because, people's kind of fallback wasn't cutting it anymore. Metallica drops this, and it's like, what the f*** are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this, because I was very into music at this point, like we talk about what I got into, and I was always a fan of music, whatever. But by 2003, my ass is listening to like Slipknot, Korn, Nothing Face, Il Nino, Chevelle. I have all these other bands, right? So when Saint Anger comes out, I don't really care.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm alone in that. I think at this point we're all listening to System of a Down, Linkin Park, Deftones. The rock landscape has changed. Metallica's not what they once were. And we get Saint Anger, so they're not back on the radar really, other than for negative shit. So I think that's kind of what it is. I think it's largely a forgotten album. If you talk to hardcore music people, they're going to remember it. But most people, when you bring up Metallica, probably don't even want to remember Saint Anger, and I can't blame them. Again,
about it.
Album is so fucking bad that they fire Bob Rock. It's the last straw for them. They're like, look, Bob, maybe they're still friends, whatever. He plays bass on this album. I don't know if you saw that, but they hired Robert Trujillo right after this album was recorded. So he's a full-time member right after this, but for recording purposes, Bob Rock records all the bass on this album. So he's, like I said, his asshole is all up in this album, and it's just fucking shit all over it and made it a fucking pile of garbage. So fuck Saint Anger. I ain't gonna fucking sit here and fucking defend it. It's garbage. It's hot fucking garbage.
It's hot as fuck. Like, if I go to pick up that with the dog bag, like, I'm gonna drop it. It's so fucking hot shit.
Yeah, light that bitch on fire and fucking ring someone's doorbell and get the fuck out of there. That's Saint Anger.
Billy Madison shit.
Hell yeah.
Called the shit poop.
Coincidentally, Saint Anger is both shit and poop.
Coincidentally, it is the shit that you poop out.
Yeah. It's your shit's poop for sure. It's probably about a 2 out of 10 for me.
Even Stink would say that stinks.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, probably 1.
Dose out of 10.
Probably
1 out of 10.
1. I can't. Again, I'll never listen to this shit again.
It's absolute garbage. Yeah, it's absolute garbage. Don't care what you say. What, man?
And all you people that like it, why?
Yeah.
Let me know.
Speaking of albums that I don't know why people like, that leads us into 2008's
Death Magnetic.
Ooh, I like this album, man.
I don't, dude.
I think it reminds me more of older Metallica than anything they've done for Load all the way to this.
I don't disagree, but I just think it does it in the laziest fucking way possible. Even with its 2 times platinum, 2 million albums sold, I think it's got some real shit production on it. It's definitely a return to form, though. I can't deny.
Rick Rubin is the producer. Isn't that crazy?
He's a great producer
He
too,
is.
but
I mean,
well, for rock.
see, I agree with that. But again, this has my favorite Metallica song on it. So maybe I'm a little more gentler on this album.
Maybe.
And I think, again, I think he sounds his best. He does a lot of his Jarl and singing, but his Jarl isn't so Yarly.
It's more balanced.
It's more balanced. It's more clean, but it still sounds good for him. And again, I really like that it's not, it didn't feel like a follow-up to Saint Anger.
Yeah.
It felt like a return to form in kind of a new age way.
Yeah, and again, I don't hate it. I mean, compared to to Saint Anger, Death Magnetic is fucking Master of Puppets. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it just feels really forced to me, and it's got its highlights. But for me, it was an overall disappointment, even for the time. And what the crazy part is this came out when there was Guitar Hero Metallica. And so that's where I'd heard way more of the album than normal. I didn't really listen to it on my headphones like I had all the previous albums. I was playing these songs in Guitar Hero all the time. And even at the time, I didn't really like the album. I was like, this is sick because it's new Metallica in 2008. I'm happy to, have a new album by them. And it's light years better than fucking Saint Anger. And 5 years later, yeah.
Interesting.
So it's weird. But it does have its highlights. The Day That Never Comes. I love All Nightmare Long. I love Unforgiven 3. What's that Suicide song? Forget what it's called. But I like
My
that song.
Apocalypse.
My Apocalypse is good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I like it. And as much as I can for a Metallica album, I do like it a lot. I think this was a hitter, and I'm not shocked at that it basically just matched Saint Anger's performance.
Mm-hmm.
I feel maybe people were, I want to say, jaded by new Metallica releases at this point.
Yeah,
like,
I can
obviously
see
everybody who loves Metallica is gonna get it, but maybe wait a while, maybe not at all, because Saint Anger probably turned people off permanently.
I wouldn't blame them.
Yeah, so
but again, a lot of those people were already turned off by Load and Reload, so they didn't even give a fuck about Saint Anger. They didn't give a fuck about Death Magnetic.
I think Saint Anger, it doesn't even feel like a follow-up to Load and Reload.
No, it doesn't.
It feels like
so
its
out of
own
place.
thing, and and it's an out of place in a bad way. Like they might have tried something, but the new metal scene just wasn't for them. But for Death Magnetic, I think they did a great job. Rick Rubin obviously was the right choice.
Mm-hmm. And he's that unconventional producer, so I don't know what he did to get them to hone back to that older sound. I mean, they were probably huge advocates of it. Like, we need to go back to form here.
And probably not having Bob Rock or whatever the fuck his name is trying to push the boundaries on something with someone and a group that didn't need it.
Yeah.
They had perfected who they were with Black Album, and it's okay to like we said, to try new things, but I just don't know what that guy's thinking was when he went into Saint Anger.
Yeah, just trying something new. And sometimes you don't try something new with a band that big. You do, but I don't know. You gotta do a better job of it. I mean, it is worth noting though, this is the last album released basically of the pre-streaming era. I mean, 2008. It's pretty much after that. It's fucking Spotify, Apple Music, records, they're not selling like they used to. This is the beginning of the decline of physical media sales for music, up until the vinyl resurgence anyway. But it did come out in a really weird time for albums. So, yeah, I mean, I give
2008
it
was still a good time.
pretty low rating though.
Ooh,
Pretty low.
really?
Like
What's
a
your
5.
rating? 5. Wow. Okay.
Like I said, I appreciate it bringing Metallica back, and it's pivotal in the next 2 albums because of that. But I just, I don't know. I can't give it a higher rating than that. I really can't. But what do you give it? Because you said you love it. You said you loved it.
Yeah, I loved it.
So what's the rating on love it?
Here's the thing though. It probably was easy to love after Saint Anger.
Yeah, but you only experienced that transition from listening to Saint Anger for the first time right now and then going to Death Magnetic.
Right after,
so
I
guess it's the same.
I see this giant
It's
change,
wild.
and like I said, it's a lot more Metallica than we've seen in a while, and that I listened to for fucking 4 hours.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably a 7 for me.
Wow.
I liked it a lot. I might also be jaded that the Unforgiven 3 is on it, and I think that is the best Metallica's ever metallic.
I think a lot of people do like Death Magnetic. I don't think I'm harsher on it than most, but
I mean, not really. The same amount of people bought Saint Anger.
yeah, but it's not always album sales, like I said.
No, it's not always.
There's the critics out there are gonna they're gonna say what they're gonna say about Saint Anger, and then Death Magnetic's gonna come out, and they're gonna be a lot more receptive of it because Saint Anger was fucking garbage. So even the critics, I'm sure, liked it more. But yeah, just a weird transition between Saint Anger to Death Magnetic. And speaking of weird transitions, let's get into kind of an off branch.
Please.
Pile of shit.
Lulu, 2009. I mean, it's not really one of the Metallica albums, but I think we got to talk about it.
2011.
Oh, 2011.
But my
Sounds
God.
Right. 2011, yeah.
My God, dude. I thought Load, Reload, Saint Anger was just a bad 3-album run.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm glad I don't have to do that again.
I mean, it is a Lou Reed album. We got to remember that. It's Lou Reed. It's
this dick.
I'm not a Lou Reed fan, so
I don't know who he really is, but if this is Lou Reed, he can suck a fuck. Because this album was stupid.
For those of you who don't know who Lou Reed is, Lou Reed was the lead singer of popular band The Velvet Underground. After they dispersed, he went solo, released a bunch of wannabe David Bowie albums. Depends on who you ask. He has his fan base. He's not for me. Anyway, Metallica loves him. He was out there looking for a backing band for this album, Lulu, and they kind of decided to collaborate. And every single track, the backing band is Metallica, so that's why we're talking about it for a second. It's gonna get like a few minutes because that's all it deserves. But fuck Lulu. There's no highlights on it for me. What's that one song called on there? Does it say something Gates? What does it say? Brandenburg Gates or some bullshit like that.
Let me look at this fucking track list of garbage here.
Because that song is far and away one of the worst goddamn songs I've ever heard in my life. Like the whole album.
Gate?
Brandenburg
the first song
Gate.
on the album. Okay, nothing's
Horrible.
as bad as Junior Dad.
God damn you, Lou Reed. I'm sorry that you're dead because I don't like that of anyone.
He died?
But yeah, he died.
I'm sad that he died, and this looks like it was
Rip.
his last album he did.
Yeah.
I would have died too if
But I
hadn't
mean,
done this.
If you haven't checked out, I mean, we probably won't do a full episode on Velvet Underground. There's going to be some deep dives where maybe we lump like 4 bands into a conversation. And Velvet Underground, they had their time and their place, and they got popular for him talking over like musical parts and shit like that.
So
Venus in
fucking dumb.
Furs. If you're listening out there and you've never listened to Velvet Underground's Venus in Furs, that song is pretty badass, and it'll kind of show you why Lou Reed was Lou Reed. But fuck him, fuck Lulu, fuck Metallica for doing this fucking album.
Dude, this was fucking dumb, dude. Maybe I don't get it. Here's the thing. Maybe I don't get it. Maybe you have to be in tune with whatever the fuck he was jabbering on about. but it was the dumbest shit in the world. I have a tiny penis. Like, I think he said that like 30 times on repeat. I don't know. I fucking couldn't wait. 20-minute song of garbage. 20-minute fucking song of garbage by Metallica. Like, this is the kind of decisions that led to fucking Saint Anger. Was this bullshit and their fucking eclectic fucking ideas of art and fucking whatever, dude. This album, they did something though. It made me feel something. It made me feel heat in my balls for how fucking pissed I was.
It's it's garbage, and
Negative 10 out of 10.
cannot believe I'm gonna say this, but there is that niche group out there that thinks this album is good.
I know. I see right here on ratings, Drowned in Sound gave it a 10 out of 10. I will fuck myself before I give this album a 10 out of 10. We got an NME, 7 out of 10. Go fuck yourself.
A 7 out of 10? That's bullshit. A 10 out of 10?
A 10 out of 10.
Oh, fuck that.
Negative 10 out of 10.
It's
Lou
just
Reed.
like musically not bad because it's Metallica, so you're like,
sounds-
oh, hell yeah.
It sounds
But,
good.
yeah.
Again, if they could strip all his vocals and put out just the instrumental, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah?
Because you're right, the music itself is good.
Yeah.
But once he starts talking, I was in the back of the van.
Yeah, he sucks.
And then, yeah, Metallica decided to put this out with their name on it was a mistake and shows bad things. It tells me that
People make bad decisions sometimes, just like Dave Grohl fucking some woman outside of his marriage and being an illegitimate father to another daughter, you know? Sometimes we make bad things, and sometimes those things are Lulu.
well, unlike Lulu, what David Grohl did was being a fucking rock star. Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Lulu is not rock star. And I heard
Lulu is just heroin-induced bullshit.
cock star is what it
It's
is.
garbage. It's a pile of trash, no doubt.
What album?
Lulu.
What?
Lulu.
I don't remember an album by that name.
I would forget it too if I could. Honestly, I had forgotten it until we did the deep dive
You're a
suggestion.
son of a bitch.
And I was like, you have to hear it.
You were excited.
Well, I'm excited because someone's got a Misery Loves Company, motherfucker. Like,
I'm here. God.
But let's talk about something good. Let's talk about 2016's
Hardwired to self-destruct.
a good album, a great album. Another album that's in my top 5.
Really?
In fact, let's just straight up say Hardwired 72 Seasons, they fill out the rest of that top 5.
Really?
They're good. I mean, they're the last 2 albums, so they kind of have to, but
I do think that they were good. I just heard of them for the first time today. And no, it seems to me they've carried on more with what Death Magnetic started. As far as a 3-album run, and kind of hearkening back to who they used to be, I think these albums do a way better job.
I think, this is the last album that I can even give you an album sales reading. One times platinum, so 1 million albums sold. Sales just straight up on a really big decrease since physical media died, and Metallica felt that probably harder than most, along with their crusade against Napster and all that bullshit for that time period. But lowest since the release of Load, obviously.
Yep.
Selling albums out is a hard thing to do, and when you're Metallica this far into your career, just not something you really are going to be able to do. But I love this album. I think it's the perfect culmination of old and new Metallica. I think they finally have found their modern sound with this album. I think
Definitely.
a lot of the Load and Reload stuff pays off here. That's just me personally. I know you were saying you didn't really feel it, but I really only mean that in like the production and the polish. And did Rick Rubin produce this one too? I don't think so. It doesn't sound
it was
like
actually Greg Feldman.
And did he do all 72 seasons as well?
Let's see. He sure did. So
Okay.
that makes sense.
Because they do kind of feel like companion pieces, even though they're, like, 7 years apart. But I like it. I love Now That We're Dead. That is easily one of my favorites. Moth into the Flame, Halo on Fire. One thing I wanted to bring up when we got to this album was Spit Out the Bone. And you were talking about, like, Master of Puppets and the relatability to that and what it was kind of going for. Spit Out the Bone is this album's version of that in a way, because it's talking about how man is relying too heavily on technology and it's eventually going to be our undoing, and that's what's spitting out the bone is technology. It's like, look at all the things we can do better. We can't really relate to each other the same way because our faces are always buried in fucking phone screens, and
Absolutely.
it's just
Yeah.
a great song in that kind of sense. But for me, this album is If Justice and Load fucked, Hardwired to Self-Destruct.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. I don't feel the load as much in this album, but I do agree with what you said, that this album kind of feels like Metallica finally found where they belong now.
Mm-hmm.
A little late in the game,
Yeah.
but especially, are they going to do another album after 72 seasons?
I don't know. I mean, a lot of people seem to think they will, and I think just based on the live performances that I see them do, I think they got one more in them, but I feel like that follow-up to 72 seasons
Would be the last.
could be the last.
Yeah.
Could be the last.
This one had some good songs on it. Confusion was good. Dream No More. What's that one? I Am a Savage. Am I Savage?
Oh, yeah.
Am I Savage? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's some good ones on here. I didn't like this one as much as Death Magnetic. Can I tell you why? No, not really. I think Death Magnetic just kind of hit it for me. I listened to Death Magnetic back when it came out in 08 too.
Oh, really?
Because it was talked about. Metallica's first album in like 5 years and blah, blah, blah. It came out and love it or hate it, It was kind of the hype thing. I checked it out. But as far as this album goes, it was my first time listening to it today, and it was pretty good. It was pretty good.
I love it.
I do like it. I don't love it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really great. I'm so pleased with it. I like it more than 72 seasons, but only just by a little bit. I think, I don't know. It's a standout Metallica album in 2016, which is really all I can say about it. Should have charted more. Should have done more in album sales.
I wonder what that is.
It was, 2016, that is literally the death rattle of like Best Buy carrying CDs.
It is true, but I mean,
it's
just,
over.
Metallica's always going to have its fans. They sell out arenas everywhere they go.
Mhm.
So, you think just in general, they would just do better.
No, it's just, no.
I mean, they sold almost 300,000 copies in the first week.
Yeah, but this is just 2016 to me is the start of all you lazy fucks out there just relying all on streaming, not buying your records. And
I am one of those.
I mean,
sorry.
I get it because again, it's like $10 an album per album, but if you don't like that many bands and they're releasing albums 5 years apart, is it really that big of a deal to throw down, $10-13 for an album every 5 to 7 years? I don't personally think so, but that's how it happens. It's not, at this point, it's not like that Metallica needed any more of your fucking money. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit
my
here
God, fuck
and,
no.
stroke the egos of fucking rich rock stars and shit. But I'm just saying, like, that's the biggest reason why it didn't chart is streaming it charted, but not as highly as their old shit and sell as much as their old shit because streaming changed the game. It just absolutely molded the music industry to something completely different. And, it is what it is. But I think there's probably not a ton to say on that album. It's weird because you start with their influential shit and you get to their newer shit and it starts to kind of wane out. It's like you can throw praise at it, but it's par for the course.
Yeah.
And,
And it's kind of hard, especially for bands and stuff coming into this new age where unfortunately rock isn't the popular genre anymore. It's now
It's hip hop
country
and country.
hip hop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're the big ones.
Those are the big ones,
guns.
and rock is largely kind of to the wayside anymore. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously it's still there. New bands are always coming out and stuff, but the mainstream wise, I mean, and it must be hard for someone like Metallica,
Oh yeah.
for people, they
I'm a strong, huge advocate of
Rock is dead.
it is dead.
it's not
dead.
like what it was before.
No, and it's sad because you see it in all across the board for all genres of metal, rock, everything.
Mhm.
Like when you call Imagine Dragons rock, what the fuck does that mean for rock then?
It's just, yeah, it's music is a victim of that. We got to make it for everybody now. So
Yep.
it's the same thing for movies, like what appeals to everybody so we can all relate on one plane. And
Exactly.
I don't like that shit.
I don't like it either.
It shouldn't be that way.
It takes the art out of it. It takes
Exactly.
like
It makes
art's
it more
not
of a
for
business.
everybody. Yeah.
Mhm.
It business ruins it, but I think that's probably why they're not hitting what they used to. Not like they need to, like you said, they made their money a long time ago. And
Yeah.
they still make their money.
Oh yeah.
But
Especially
it's just
like
hard.
you mentioned before, they own all of their master tracks. So
Yeah, they own it all. So
You know.
anytime their shit gets used,
Mhm.
they make the moolah.
yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. Hardwired, Self-Destruct. There's not a lot to say about these last two albums. Not that they're not good. You especially like them, so that
yeah.
shows that they're good. That they can be good. If you haven't listened to them, but
Yeah, I mean, Hardwired is my third favorite album by them.
so that
know.
just tells you something. But
yeah.
yeah, it's like you said, kind of going to this point in their career. They've already done everything they can, good or bad. So what else do you have to say?
I just dig the songwriting on the album. Like I said,
Mhm.
it's really, it sounds like they're trying to hone back to the old them, but in a not lazy way, like Death Magnetic. That's just me. I feel like it's more polished and refined, like what I was really starting to enjoy. Yeah. Fuck Death Magnetic. Just fuck that. Fuck it. Fuck it. It's just not that good. I'm sorry. It's not that good. But yeah, I mean, I like it. 9 out of 10. Solid as fuck to me.
Probably like 6.5.
Interesting. This is like the first episode where a lot of our opinions have been completely opposite in a lot of ways.
It is,
Yeah.
but it
that's-
shows what we see in Metallica and the influence that, because it makes sense how much you like Load. I feel like with how much you like Korn, Limp Bizkit,
Yep.
stuff like that. So kind of makes sense. But with that being said,
I can't wait to do an episode on Limp Bizkit.
yeah, that's because you do it all for the cookie.
I just love that band. I'm not one of those people. Like we talked about it in our side dive as well. Like, there's no guilty pleasures.
There's not.
You just like what you like. If people don't agree with you, fuck them. You're not listening to it to please them. You're trying to please yourself. And, whatever is aesthetically pleasing to your eyes and ears, that's what's up here at Deep Dive for me. I mean,
Yeah, we all got our choices, our likes.
speaking of likes and choices, now we're here at the very end of the album run, 2023's
72 seasons.
that thing kind of sounds like Freddy Krueger a little bit too, in a way.
A little bit.
I guess it just depends on how you draw your voice out, but I really like it. I will miss that part. We're getting a new mixing board, at least hopefully by next recording. So I don't know that any of those things will carry over, but
We'll figure it out.
if they don't, you can just give it a round of applause for what it's done for us. And going from there, we're at 72 seasons. The most recent Metallica album, the most polished probably of all their albums, because
Definitely.
as technology's gotten better, we reap the benefits. I don't have any album sales information for you on this one because, like I was telling you, it pretty much only sold crazy amounts of not crazy, but notable amounts of albums in other countries and other areas of the world. There's really no reporting of the U.S. charting. I'm sure the streaming numbers are there, but I don't give two fucking shits.
So interesting here. So the first week this debuted, it sold 146,000 copies. That's not the weird part. 134 of them coming from pure album sales.
Yeah,
So that
that's
means
weird.
like physicals, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
So
I bought it. I bought 2 copies of it when it came out, CD and vinyl, and that's just how I roll now. So that's what they're talking about is shit like that. So
this is the 12th album to chart in the top 10 for Metallica.
interesting.
And it's the first one since
What, Hardwired?
Injustice for All. Oh, not to debut at number 1.
Oh yeah, no. I was gonna say.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, we didn't really talk about charts. We skipped that. But yeah, every Metallica album up until this basically hits number 1. This is the first one not to.
So here it is. As of May 2024, the album has done a total of 373,000 albums.
It's so weak for
It's so
Metallica.
weak.
But again, a lot of the problem that I think bands like Metallica kind of forget is 7 years in between an album is pretty wild.
It's a long time.
No one should be doing that. And I know they're going to blame it on touring and they have lives outside of music, but
And
it's
they're
like,
old.
yeah, and they're old. I mean, Tool took 10 fucking years in between an album. It's like, what the fuck? If you're a
is
band
crazy.
and you're popular and you want, I mean, obviously there are varying degrees of what you're in it for, but for me, I'm pretty set at the 3 to 4 year in between albums deal. I think that's fine. If you go any more than that, you're risking, just people kind of dropping off. And I know in 2023, I don't know a lot of people that like Metallica, and I was going to bring this up. They're pretty much at this point catering to their older fan base, and they're not really trying to get new people to listen to their music. And,
No, not at all.
So that is what it is, and that happens with lots of bands. AC/DC, Rolling Stones, Aerosmith. Eventually, you hit that stagnant moment where you're a novelty act, and your live shows are what you're known for. And a lot of bands, you see a lot of bands do it. Kiss, for the longest time, didn't record any new albums with their newer members up until a certain point, and they did 2 of them and then they never did them again. So I think you realize that yourself as a band, like at this point we're Metallica, we have our Master of Puppets, we have our Enter Sandman, we have our One, we have our big fucking songs, we have everything we're known for. We don't, we'll release an album because our dedicated older fan base wants it, but they're not trying to turn heads anymore, and that's where we're at with 72 Seasons. I do think it's a great album, though. I think it's, again, a nice continuation of Hardwired, another set of fucking fantastic songs, and it's my number 4 in my top 5 for them.
I think it was okay.
Poisonally.
I think it definitely was a good follow-up to Hardwired. 7 years, though. Yeah, that's a long time.
Way too
especially
long.
when you're aging as quick as they are.
Mm-hmm.
But
And if you're their fan base, you're aging too fucking quick. It's
yeah,
like,
dude, they're getting old too. But
it's like I can track moments of my life by Metallica releases. That's the funniest thing. Like I could tell you, like, damn, in 2016 I was doing this and this and this, and I remember when it came out. In 2023, I'm gonna have that same thing. I can do that all the way down, basically, and it's just weird with 7 years in between.
I feel like just this album, the problem with is just Metallica has kind of run out of things to say.
Yeah, and I mean, I think
And
every
it's-
artist runs into that wall.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not really a diss against Metallica. I mean, they've done how many fucking albums? They've been around for 40 years,
Yeah,
so it's something that's going to happen. But I think this album kind of is where that comes to a point.
I think it's time to introduce another new sound change because
Maybe.
that'd probably be the only way that, and it's gonna, but this is a touchy point in your career to do it. It's like you've kind of gained a resurgence in a
Mhm.
way of like your older sound, like we said, kind of your culmination of everything you've ever done. So if you switch it up again, that's probably your end. But Who knows what they'll do in the future? I don't know. Personally, I would like to see them switch it up again because we've really had another 3-album run for most people in Death Magnetic, Hardwired, and 72 Seasons, where they're kind of in their return to form. So, how old are they going to be before we get the follow-up to this album? If we wait another 7 years, that's 2030. Where will music be in 2030? And how relevant will Metallica be?
Maybe it'll be a perfect time for Metallica to come back, because one thing we do know about, trends and shit like that is that they always come back around.
Yeah.
So Metallica's time will come back.
Oh,
and
for
who
sure.
knows? Maybe 2030 when they drop 92 seasons, it'll be their time again, So
They're
who
still a
knows,
big
but
band, though.
I do agree
you know.
with you. If we follow their kind of trend, their 3-album trend, they're due for a shakeup.
Yep.
They shook the shit out of the tree with Load, Reload, and Saint Ganger, but I don't know. I just think you're right also that they've hit a point in their age now where they've got to, not got to, but they should just stick to where they're at. They're finally, like you said, at a good point with their fan base. They've kind of harkened back to an older Metallica that's more them.
Mm-hmm.
So is it a good idea to shake the ship? But you do one last album, make it crazy, and just bow out.
Go out with a bang.
Go out with a bang, good or bad.
Yep.
Because, truth is, bad press is good press.
The truth is, this is Metallica. They've done everything they've ever needed to do.
And ever will need to do.
Yeah, you can say what you will about them. They're one of the most successful bands in the motherfucking world.
Absolutely.
They're a household name.
They always will be.
They're like the Beatles of metal.
Absolutely.
There's just no denying it.
Their singles will be forever remembered. They're still using songs today, games,
Yeah, what they used Master of Puppets in that TV show everybody loves, right? Stranger Things.
Yep.
Yeah, Master of Puppets is in there. They'll hit the new generation.
No, it's not Master of Puppets. I think it's something from that album. But either way,
I'm pretty sure it's Master of
is it?
Puppets.
It might be. It might be. I don't remember.
I think it's that character Eddie.
Eddie.
Yeah.
But either way, so your rating for it, 72 seasons.
It's probably like an 8 or a 9. I like it a lot. It's in my top 5 of theirs.
That's nice.
I'm gonna give it a 6.5.
Oh, is that so, Alvin?
That's true. Alvin showed up to give his 2 cents, and I'm going to agree with him. It lands on the same page that Hardwired did. It's good. I like Death Magnetic more, but
That's
it was
so
a good
wild to
album.
me, dude.
It's a good album. I like Death Magnetic, man. Leave me alone.
Fuck, that's
it's all
funny.
right, but this one, if I were to rate, because I haven't given a rating for my top 5 albums, it would probably go Black Album, Master, Injustice, Death Magnetic, and then
I feel like it's got to be Ride the Lightning for you.
probably Ride
Just
the
based on
Lightning.
the trajectory of everything we've gone through.
Probably Ride the Lightning. That
Yeah.
5th one's hard because those 4 albums are probably the ones I'll listen to again.
Mhm.
But Ride the Lightning, I might never listen to again. So I have a
Interesting.
top 4.
My top 5 was obviously, if you were following along as you
Yep.
listened, was Black Album, number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Load, number
Yep.
2.
What?
Number 3 was Hardwired. Number 4, 72. Number 5 is Master. I know it's wild to put Master below all those others, but
And not to even include Injustice or
Justice and
Load.
Lightning are great albums still.
Load.
But the whole point of the top 5er is to be as truthful with yourself and cut down the fat for yourself and figure out what are for you. And if you had asked me this question, if we had done this podcast in the year 2000 or 2004 or 2006, Master would have been number 1 probably. But
It's interesting how
I've changed.
how it changes for you
Yeah.
over time, Because mine will probably change over time. Who knows? Death Magnetic may creep up there to number 1.
Yeah, maybe.
Probably not.
I would also have
Probably
to
not.
say like mild shout outs to Garage Days and the first S&M. I really
Yes.
like them.
I
They're
really
both
like
good.
them too.
S&M 2, kind
It
of
was
weak.
all right.
It
And
wasn't
that's
as
where I
good.
feel like it was kind of weird to hear James on 72 Seasons as compared to 4 years earlier on S&M 2, where I just feel like a lot of the power in his voice was gone. He sounded older.
Yeah.
Like, he still sounds like himself, but like he sounds like he's an old man.
Yeah.
And it's hard. The singing he does has to be hard.
Yeah. I
His
mean,
Jarl,
that's the beauty of being James Hetfield, though.
I guess.
You're solidified. You're Big Papa hit. You don't have to prove shit to anybody at this point.
Not
You're
anymore.
one of the biggest icons in metal. He's influenced a slew of people. He's my favorite guitar player of all time. And it's not because he's a fucking shredder. It's because he's, like I said, the king of the rhythm, the king of the heavy. I think he brings that shit. He brings the heavy. But that's the only reason he's my favorite. I mean, there's plenty other technically proficient badasses out there that are better than him, but
It's all
he's
based on your
fantastic
opinion.
still. Yeah, he's great.
Well,
Well,
that's the Metallica episode. I do like that we listened to all this Metallica I haven't listened to in years or never have.
Mhm.
It really put a perspective on how much I just don't really care for Metallica.
But that's the beauty of the deep dive. Like I said, that's
Exactly.
why I wanted to do this, because it's like always got so much going on in life. New music is always happening. New era. That there's just so much change in the world, and when we go back and we reflect on how they started to where they are, it's interesting to think about. It's interesting to talk about. If you're out there listening to us, do a deep dive of your own. Start at Kill 'Em All. Get yourself to 72 Seasons.
Deep dive.
Yeah, dive deep. And don't forget to check out our podcast, Compadre, like we mentioned earlier. I'll give him another shout out.
Cinematic magnification, everybody.
Yeah, that's very cool of him to do that for us. So we are hoping to do some other shit here in the future for you. I know we're going to do Jordan Peele coming up.
Woo!
I think we're going to do the new Joker movie in a couple weeks.
That'll be a fun one, especially with my dislike of musicals.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I've heard it's not much of a musical,
Yeah, I heard the singing parts are more to compliment like just Lady Gaga. and
which I
everything,
could
but-
I could deal with that if
Yeah.
it's not like La La Land
Yeah.
or some shit like that, like fucking Grease.
Yeah.
Grease the tires off a cliff.
I don't have high expectations, but I'm a big Joker fan and I'm going to watch that bitch anyway. So,
I don't think it'll top the first one, but I think everybody knew that.
no, definitely not. I mean, sometimes it's just, you do it and you hope it sticks, and it doesn't always stick. But
Nope.
we're also going to be doing, some interesting things here in the future. We got, like I said, a new mixing board coming along, and got some ideas for a little diversity in what we're doing. Got some books coming at you.
Ooh.
Maybe a couple video games here again. Starfield, I think went over pretty well. So
We got a
based
couple
on
more
all
coming.
that, yeah, we'll dive deep. But that was episode 11, Metallica's discography.
Metallica.
It's definitely a good time talking about all that. I hope those dudes hear our deep dive on them, and well, maybe you don't so much, but I hope they hear my perspectives.
I hope they hear it. Maybe they can understand where I'm coming from.
I'm sure they do. They've been hearing that shit their whole lives. I mean,
Big Papa hit.
a lot of the shit that you said, I think, is pretty reflective of the consensus for them. So, kudos to you for going into it, listening to all those albums. I just want to shout out to Rex. Actually, we gotta think about that in the terms of things, because I pick a lot of the topics that we do, and while he's going to be picking more going forward, he's a trooper because he's listening to shit that is way outside of his element, and
It's fun.
we're doing that for you out there, though. We want these
All for you guys.
unbiased takes where, I love Metallica. He's lukewarm. So what do you guys think? We still haven't really got any responses on Facebook or Twitter. But I would really like to hear your opinions.
Let us know what you think about Metallica. Do you love them all the way through? What's your favorite era?
Yep. And we're everywhere now, finally. If we're, I think I told you, Rex, we're on all platforms now. We're on Amazon. We're on Spotify Music. We're on Apple Music. We're on Good Pods, whatever the fuck that is.
Pod, yeah.
But hey, we're there.
We're there.
We're
Check us out.
We're on YouTube. We want you to listen to us, and we appreciate those of you who do. Except for those of you who decided to skip out on Blink 182 and Beetlejuice. I don't know what the fuck's going on with those episodes.
What the fuck is wrong with Mr. Juice?
Yeah. Stop hating on Mr. Juice and Mr. DeLong and Mr. Hoppus and Mr. Barker.
Come on, guys. Keep it real.
Yeah, keep it real. Keep it real and keep listening to Deep Dive because I'm your host, Practical.
It's your boy, Rex.
And we will check you next